Hello. Hello. I wonder if this is working. Oh yeah, it is. Look. I got a little widget thing. It lights up when I talk, and then when I'm quiet, it goes like that. That's kind of neat, and it jumps a little bit. This little jump. It's like I'm a real VTuber now. And my goal is to make one for all the people who regularly appear on my stream as well. I made one for Grom, but I haven't checked if it works because he actually needs to join the stream for me to see if it works. But it should work. Yeah, I'm gonna move my Discord window over here. Let's see. Okay. High tech goat. Yeah, I know, right? Okay, we're gonna be watching a documentary today because today is Fidel Castro's birthday, and I think, in his honor, we should watch this 2001 documentary from Bravo Films, which is my favorite documentary about the Cuban Revolution in general. But it is technically a biographical documentary about Fidel himself as a person, but obviously it goes into a lot about the Cuban Revolution, which I think is cool. And it interviews a lot of really interesting people. Angela Davis is in it, and then like former like agents of the CIA are in it, and current like members of the U.S. government are in it, talking about like shit that they did back then. So yeah, I think it's gonna be. I think the people who haven't seen it yet are gonna find it very interesting. I've already seen it, but I love it so much that I don't mind it watching multiple times. Hi, J Victor Official. Okay. I am gonna go. Gonna open up Twitch chat. I mean, I have Twitch chat open, but only as a little window. I actually wanna have it open so I can moderate. That would be useful. Channel moderate. Oh, that was me. Oh, politics. I don't know, for some reason we're in the politics category. I don't know why, but for some reason I thought we were in a category called Polish, and I was wondering why Twitch thought I was speaking Polish. Where's the chat? Oh, here's the chat. Moderator view. Playing politics. That's fun. I'm playing politics. Politics is a video game, if you think about it. Put this over here. Hello, Comrade Limlecht. How are you? Put this over here. Can't wait for this Polish revaluation video. Okay. Well, without further ado, let's get started. Oh wait. Okay, let me know how the audio is. Oh, right.
On this beautiful Caribbean island, Fidel Castro has led Cuba for over 40 years. A socialist survivor in a capitalist world. For some, he is a demon. For others, a symbol of resistance and social justice.
Ese árbol no existía. Vamos por la casa que fue del abuelo.
In 1996, at the age of 70, Fidel revisited his childhood home with a longtime friend, the world-famous Colombian novelist, Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Yes, Fidel is dead. He died in 2016, if I recall correctly.
Fidel began life in Biran, a farming
This
area far
documentary
from
is from
Cuba's
2001.
capital. He was the third oldest of 3 boys and 4 girls.
Mi mamá fue hija de campesino muy pobre, no pudo ir a una escuela. Ella aprendió a leer y escribir sin ir a una escuela. Y mi papá también era analfabeto, no sabía leer y escribir. Vino de recluta de España antes de acabarse la guerra, lo trajeron de recluta.
Fidel's father, Angel, who was an immigrant worker from Spain, eventually became a wealthy sugarcane planter. His parents are buried near the family home.
Oh, come on. Wait, hang on. Oh no. What? Why is it doing this? Seriously?
It was in this public school that Fidel first studied as a child.
Public school, that sounds a lot like communism to me.
Arriba. Si estaba de frente. Un poquito así de la... Esa es la duda que tengo interés.
From this simple school, Fidel's family sent him to a Catholic boarding school in Cuba's second largest city, Santiago de Cuba, and then to the Jesuit-run Belén High School in Havana.
Él puede hacer alarde de ser el hombre que más memoria tiene que yo conozca. Hay una cosa que hacía él, las asignaturas que no le gustaban, él se las aprendía gráficamente de memoria. De modo que arrancaba las páginas del libro y lo leía después lo leía como si estuviera leyendo el libro actualmente.
Él venía de un colegio donde no había practicado tanto o casi nada el básquetbol, sino más bien el soccer. Y en La Habana lo que valía era el básquet. Pues él empezó enseguida a querer practicar básquet y enseguida me dijo a mí, oiga padre, ¿no podría ponerme usted una luz en el flor de básquet sobre el aro para que cuando los demás se acuestan yo pueda de noche seguir practicando? Cuando Fidel Castro se graduó, yo escribí, yo digo, Fidel Castro es madera de héroe y la historia de su patria un día tendrá que hablar de él.
At the University of Havana, where Fidel arrived in 1945 to study law, the political atmosphere was so highly charged that it often turned to violence. Students fighting against corruption and injustice were targets of repression. Fidel entered the fray, not as a communist, but as a radical nationalist with a passion for social justice.
La universidad fue una gran escuela, la verdad, una gran escuela donde para mí nos formamos nosotros y se formó desde luego Fidel. Nosotros organizamos el movimiento estudiantil junto con el movimiento obrero.
Fidel tenía ya desde entonces características muy especiales. La asamblea más compleja, la situación más difícil de desentrañar, él la dominaba con la palabra. En la escuela de filosofía, el alumnado era casi todo muchachas, y además muy lindas. Tanto que en una de las casas de estudiantes en que estas muchachas, muchas del interior, se alojaban, le habíamos puesto la bombonera. Fidel venía a la escuela de filosofía muy a menudo porque había una carita, una muchacha, un rostro que lo había subyugado.
He was married to a young woman who was the daughter of one of the elites. That marriage, however, only lasted 6 years because he was imprisoned for his revolutionary activities, and under considerable pressure from her family, they were divorced. He did, however, have a son from that marriage.
In 1952, now a practicing lawyer, Fidel ran as a candidate for the Orthodox Party.
Right, so something that I wanted to talk about, I didn't really find a good place to pause to talk about it, but it's interesting to talk about nationalism, especially left-wing nationalism, right? Because clearly we know that there's a difference between the nationalism of, white Southerners in the United States and the nationalism of the Vietnamese farmers who were defending their country against French colonialists and the American imperialists. And in that same way, there's a difference between someone being a nationalist in a country that is in the imperial core and someone being a nationalist in a country like Cuba and fighting for social justice like Fidel Castro did. So what is nationalism? Well, I mean, nationalism is a very broad term that doesn't really mean anything. Like Fidel Castro was fighting a nationalistic struggle in the sense that he was fighting for a Cuba independent of colonial oppressors. So independent of Spain and independent of the United States' control over the Cuban government. Is that nationalism? Well, he's fighting for a free Cuba that's free of foreign interference, but Cuba obviously is a colonized nation, a country that has been oppressed and been occupied by foreign powers. So is it nationalism, right? Was Nelson Mandela a nationalist? The people fighting for African liberation and for an end to colonialism, were they nationalists? Sort of. I mean, you can call them nationalists, but it's misleading, I think. And a lot of people get tripped up on, the whole left-wing nationalism thing, because people who are on the left tend to have a very negative view of the word nationalism. So in more modern terms, we tend to talk about anti-imperialism and anti-colonialism instead of nationalism or left-wing nationalism. Left-wing nationalism is not fixated on paleogenesis. I mean, yeah, I think when we're talking about left-wing nationalism and right-wing nationalism, there is this, it's easy to think that they have something in common, that being nationalism, but that's not really the case. Left-wing nationalism and right-wing nationalism don't really have anything in common other than a very vague principle of wanting their country to be independent. What's the difference between nationalism and patriotism? Patriotism is more of a social attitude on the individual level, whereas nationalism is more of a broad term. It's like macro versus micro scale, right? Patriotism is about the individual being loyal to the country or to some ideal, whereas nationalism is fighting for a specific ideology, that being a nation state which is sovereign and independent. At least on paper. You of course also have nationalist movements that don't actually want to be, independent of all foreign influence, that are still totally okay with, foreign capital having influence in a nation, foreign companies like American multinational conglomerates having an influence and having a say in owning land and owning property in a country. Right? You can have nationalists on the right that aren't opposed to that kind of foreign interference. They're only opposed to, people of different skin colors living in the country, which is not actually like any kind of foreign influence. It's just like people being alive in your presence. Anyway, that was my tangent.
Anti-corruption coalition. Cuba's hero of independence, Jose Marti, inspired the movement. The election never took place. General Batista, who had been in power before, staged a coup to prevent an Orthodox party victory.
Hi, Mama.
Por aquella época, lo que se vivía con Batista era la corrupción rampante, el juego, la prostitución, la debacle, la violencia. Estamos hablando de un país que iba al desastre.
I knew Cuba before Fidel Castro. I went there. It was the playground of the mafia. We had all the big jazz nightclubs that Nat King Cole and myself were petitioned to perform in. I did not see democracy in Cuba. As a matter of fact, if anything, I saw blatant racism and oppression.
After the Batista coup, all political parties and constitutional rights were suspended. The university was shut down. But the students continued protesting. Fidel began organizing a clandestine opposition group.
Something that's not, I feel, not talked about enough really is the amount of racism and segregation that was present in Cuba. So Cuba, especially during under the Batista government, but even before Batista, had inherited a lot of its white chauvinism from the United States. The United States, of course, had a lot of influence in Cuba ever since Spain stopped being a colony, right? The United States basically took over Cuba and had Cuba as a colony, or a protectorate, or whatever it was called. It wasn't called a colony, of course, because the U.S. is free and democratic. Around the same time that the United States took the Philippines from Spain and made the Philippines a colony. So Cuba was very similar to the southern United States. Havana has been compared. Havana before the Cuban Revolution could be compared to Atlanta, right? It had gambling, it had prostitution, it had organized crime, and it had racism. It had a lot of racism. It had the equivalent of Jim Crow laws and segregation. The southern bus laws, right? That segregated where people could sit based on their ethnicity. Those laws that were present in the United States, they were taken and also applied in Cuba. And of course, under Spanish colonial rule, there was also a long history of anti-black racism. Oh snap! What is this? It's a raid from the one and only Bleep Blomp Ben. Oh, thank you for the bits. Onates Tepiso. Keep up the great content. Thank you. That's so nice. Today we are celebrating... Why am I flashing? Oh, it's a little widget thing. I'm trying it out for the first time today. It's whenever I'm not talking, I'm like that. And then when I talk, I light up and I bounce a little bit. It's just something I'm trying out to make my avatar a little bit more animated without actually becoming a VTuber. Because I don't have a webcam. I don't own one. Anyway. Jesus. It is hailing like crazy outside. My God, the sky is falling. I might have to close my window. Today we're watching a documentary. Oh, damn, Carmen. Thank you so much for the 100 bits. The documentary we're watching today is called Fidel, the Untold Story by Bravo Films. It's a documentary from 2001 about the life of Fidel Castro. We've only just started. We're only 8 minutes into the documentary. We're currently... Oh, thank you for expanding your subscription, Carmen. Right, we're currently in the pre-revolution era. We're still going through the Batista dictatorship. And I was just talking about how... Anarchist Laboratory Sean, thank you so much for subscribing at Tier 1. And with that, we got ourselves a hype train. Wow. Hype train. A hype train to honor Fidel Castro. I'll be sure to go out and buy a bottle of Havana Club rum. Thank you for the 1 bit. Learning mit Leo. Learning with Leo. Yeah, I was just talking about how the racial segregation laws in Cuba. Thank you, Sean, for gifting a tier 1 sub to K. How do you say? And thank you, Increasingly Phil, for subscribing at Tier 1. Wow. And thank you, Carmen, for the 100 bits. Oh my goodness. That's so overwhelming. Oh, hey, Grom.
Hello, it's me.
Hang on, let me see. I made a little widget for you as well. Let me see if it works. Yeah. Hang on. I need to make you smaller than me so I feel more important. Say something?
Something.
Yeah, there you go. Look at that.
What do you mean, look at what? Oh, they light up when we're talking?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought, like, I watched your stream for a little bit, and I thought, like, your shit's fucked.
No,
It's
no.
flashing.
No, it's to indicate who's talking. Oh my god, there's so many bits. Carmen, 100 bits. J Victor Official, 200 bits. Grammar Socialist, subscribing at Tier 1. Got the hype train to level 3. What? That's never happened before. No, wow. That's incredible.
Nice.
What is going on outside? Is it raining in Skåne as well?
No, it's super humid, though, so it's probably going to.
Yeah. Oh, Nate's tape, so thank you for subscribing at Tier 1.
Yeah, get the scam trolley to level 5. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I do normally play Train Simulator, so I should be getting a lot more hype trains than I usually get.
Exactly.
Neo Florian, thank you for gifting Tier 1 sub to Subscription Steve. Disgusting Human in Copenhagen also. Yeah, you guys down south might have to prepare for a bit of rain, because the sky just fell down outside my window. J Victor Official, thank you for the 500 bits. And the hype train is at level 4.
Nice. You see what I made?
This is one train you know how to conduct. Well, thank you, Sean. Hey, I'm not that bad of a train driver, okay? What did you send in the... What did you send? It's not loading.
Oh, it should be. Come on.
Nope. Oh, wait, there it is. It's Ben chugging something.
A monster.
Oh, I see. Sean, thank you for gifting a Tier 1 sub to Maria Hall DK.
The hype train buys Azure train DLCs. That's what it does.
Yeah, exactly. Granat Marcus, thank you for 100 bits. We're never gonna watch the doc, are we? No, well, there's a hype train, we're not.
No.
Sounds slightly different, but I can't quite pin down how. Oh, I'm having the microphone a little bit further away from my mouth because I listened back to a recording and I was peaking a little bit too much, so I'm just...
No, that's not it. You sound happier. That's what you do. You're not as monotone as you usually are.
Oh, It's probably the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more bits and subs I get, the happier I am.
Wow.
And then
Call
when I'm
yourself a
poor
socialist.
and it's the end of the month and I can't pay my rent, then I'm monotone.
Yeah.
That's probably what it is. I should share my screen with you so we can actually watch the thing.
Yeah, you should.
J Victor Official. Oh my god. J Victor Official, thank you for the 500 subs. Judgment for Ease 1, thank you for the 1 biddy. Neo Florian, thank you for gifting 5 tier 1 subs, which went to Tria Glodite, Black Forest 98, Hannah Lindy Sub, Jagged Jim, Stratos Melky 100, Judgment Free Zone. Thank you for subscribing at tier 1. Oh, did I say 500 subs? I meant 5 subs. Points of View, thank you for subscribing with Prime Gaming. And Francis the Rogue, thank you for subscribing at tier 1. Subscription Steve, thank you for the 1 biddy. Appreciate it. And that was that it? Yeah, we got the hype train level 5. We completed the hype train. Oh my god. Hang on, this calls for celebration music. Oh wait, hang on. I should actually put it on the screen as well. Oh my god. Subscription Steve. Oh yeah, I saw you. Lerner Mitleo, thank you for the 1 bitch. 1 bit. Oh my god, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you for the 1 bit. Oh my god, that was it's a bit of a Freudian slip there. I think I have a hat to call this one. Perfect. It's like a glove. What is going on? Well, we reached the last level of the hype train, and as everyone knows, when that happens, we play Hasbi Rabi. But the cover version, because that one doesn't have copyright.
Should have known that would happen.
This is an opening for a spy movie. It is not. Do I have a link to the song? Yeah, I can link you the song. Here. Seem to have a fitting hat for every moment in life. That's my philosophy. Yeah, be sure to bookmark that link.
Save it.
I need to learn Urdu. Why not?
Oh, there we go.
Hey, Ben.
It's a a bit small. I think you can make it bigger because I didn't resize it for emote.
I'm oppressing the Christians. Well, that's never stopped me before. Okay, that's it. Hype train over. No more Aspirabi.
Yeah.
That's the rules. Now back to Fidel Castro.
Wow, chat. Only 102% on that level 5 hype train. Oh, disappointed. Oh my god, Maria.
Emotes. Wow, so many emotes. I love the bird. I love the hype squawk emote. It's a birdie.
You get all the emotes from the hype train?
I got one, I think.
Oh.
I'm not sure. I'm seeing a bunch of them going up. I don't know which ones I got, though. I have no idea. Where do you even see them? Where do you see the hype train emotes? Do you know?
Yeah, somewhere on that list. I have
Hype sus, hype yum, hype frog, hype miss, hype heh. I like hype yum. That's good.
These are my hype train emotes.
Read a religious text. You know what? Keeping with Allah, we can do a random verse from the Quran.
Do it.
Let's see. Hang on. Ayat 38. So whenever guidance come to you from me, then whoever follows my guidance, then there will neither be any fear on them, nor will they grieve. Okay. Speaking of... Prata bara svenska i 1 minut. Vi kommer aldrig se på den här dokumentären, tror jag. 60 sekunder. Jag sätter en timer. Jag sätter den på... Fan, ge mig en jävla timer.
Jävla.
Så vad har du gjort idag?
Absolut ingenting. Inte. Bara suttit och glott på stream. Och hållit på och fibbla omkring. Typ.
Jag var ute och åt glass. På en glassdate.
Ja.
Det var kul.
Ja.
Förutom det. Jag såg fåglar när jag var ute. Kajo.
Ja. Kajo?
Mm.
Jag vet inte vad det är.
De här som är svarta med vit mage. Magpie på engelska.
Jaha. Skata. De heter skator.
Är det ja, jag blandar nog ihop dem.
Ja.
Vad är en kaja nu igen?
Ingen aning.
Ja, kajor är de som är... De är gråa på magen. De ser ut som kråkor. Fast lite annorlunda.
Jaha, ja visst ja.
Okej, that's it. Okay, let's get back to the documentary before someone starts a hype train or wants me to read from the Quran again. I'm gonna take off my hat. Okay. Oh wait, I'm not even sharing my screen with you. I forgot I was gonna do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Muchos eran gente joven con inquietudes revolucionarias que seguían a Fidel porque lo veían con condiciones de líder y porque además le decía, esta etapa de Cuba hay que resolverla por la acción revolucionaria por cuanto no hay otra salida.
On the 26th of July, 1953, Fidel led an attack on the Moncada garrison in Santiago de Cuba. This marked the beginning of the armed struggle against Batista.
Pensábamos tratar de provocar un levantamiento nacional para el derrocamiento de Batista. Caso de no lograrse el levantamiento nacional, o en el caso de que Batista pudiera reaccionar con fuerzas superiores y atacarnos aquí en Santiago de Cuba, la idea nuestra era con las armas del cuartel Moncada marchar a las montañas y librar la guerra irregular en las montañas.
The operation had hardly begun when a group of Fidel's followers was surprised by a military patrol. 2 of the 150 participants were women, Aide Santa Maria and Melba Hernandez. 61 were killed, only 6 in combat. The rest were tortured and murdered after their arrest. Both women survived.
Fue muy dura, porque después cuando resultamos prisioneros y nos llevaron para el cuartel y nos sentaron así en el piso, de allí iban sacando a los muchachos o devolviendo a los muchachos, como el caso de Gómez García, que nos los devolvieron brutalmente heridos, destrozados, sin dientes. Aquello era una cosa horrible. A mí no me gusta hablar de esto.
Fidel survived thanks to a caring black officer.
Unacceptable.
Then began what would become the most famous trial in Cuban history.
Fidel, en su alegato, está terminando su alegato, da así en la mesa con las manos y dice, condenadme, no importa, la historia me absolverá. Eso es lo que dice Fidel.
Oh yeah, there are
Todo
a few
el personal se queda
scenes in
a la
this documentary
expectativa,
of
se quedan inmóviles.
dead bodies and
Y
stuff.
entonces él, de pie, vuelve a hacer así, dice, bueno, ya terminé. Al pasar por delante de mí, cuando ya se lo llevara, me dijo, ¿tomaste nota? Digo, sí.
Fidel and 29 of his comrades were imprisoned on the Isle of Pines. Fidel for 15 years. He defiantly named his political movement after the date of the Moncada attack, the 26th of July, and smuggled out a manifesto based on his trial defense, entitled History Will Absolve Me. It would become the inspiration for the revolution.
Yo tuve mi actitud de rebeldía, me aislaron. Tenía todo el tiempo para leer. Leía 12 horas, 14 horas, 16 horas. Y después nunca he tenido oportunidad de leer tantas horas seguidas.
Fidel and his companions were freed after 2 years. Batista, giving in to popular protest, declared a general amnesty for political prisoners. 6 weeks after their release, Fidel left for Mexico, and there, with a group of followers, they planned a new attempt to overthrow the dictator. Looking for support, Fidel toured Cuban communities in the United States, in New York, New Jersey, and Florida. Many sympathizers, both rich and poor, contributed to his cause. By the following year, 1956, Fidel had assembled the nucleus of a guerrilla force and felt ready to return to Cuba. A young Argentine doctor, Ernesto Che Guevara, joined them.
Los unió en primer lugar sus ideales. Hay una pequeña escrito,
un
pequeño escrito de mi papá donde dice, me pasé toda la noche
Oh, really?
hablando con el jefe, sí, con Fidel, y al otro día amanecí siendo miembro de su grupo, ¿no?
After the legendary 12-hour meeting, Che's life became an important part of the Cuban Revolution. 82 people, including Che, set out from Mexico on the cabin cruiser Granma. An uprising in Santiago de Cuba was planned to coincide with their arrival.
Horas antes de desembarco, se cayó un hombre al agua. Empezaron a buscarlo y el hombre no aparecía y gritábamos, fulanito, Roque, y no aparecía.
Oh, you're looking in chat?
Hasta que al final, y de aquí no nos vamos hasta que no lo salvemos. Eso conmovió a la gente y le levantó la combatividad al escuchar esa frase y decir, coño, con este hombre no hay abandonado.
¿Y lo encontraron?
No hay olvidado. Sí, lo encontramos. A costa de que se echaba a perder la expedición.
The synchronization of the uprising and landing failed. The Batista military successfully put down the revolt in the city. The grandma arrived 2 days later than expected, and the group landed in a mangrove swamp. The 82 men scattered, but were soon discovered by Batista's forces. Fidel and a few others escaped and refused to admit defeat. Of the original 82, only 21 managed to regroup in the Sierra Maestra Mountains. This is where the guerrilla war began, and the initial group was able to survive and grow. Che Guevara was the group's doctor.
El primer comandante que hizo Fidel Castro en la sierra, con el consenso de todos nosotros, dijo, aquí el que ve el primer comandante es Che. Porque es el más preparado, porque conoce los caminos, porque para mí es el más estratega. Fue Che. Después fue Raúl y yo, y después Camilo, Ramirito y los demás. Después.
Much of their support came from the farmers in the Sierra Maestra Mountains. Some of them joined the guerrillas and became commanders. Both men and women soon joined Fidel's guerrilla movement, and despite traditional male prejudice, a women's battalion was formed.
One of the most important people in his life was a woman called Celia Sanchez. She was the daughter of a rural physician. Her father had provided free health care to many of the poor, impoverished rural people in the area, and she was very much attracted to Fidel's revolutionary movement.
Celia Sanchez remained at Fidel's side for 20 years and held important government posts until her death in 1980. Fidel and his commanders built up their 26th of July movement guerrilla army from a wide range of political allegiances. Batista's forces were trained by the United States, which also armed them with tanks, artillery, and aircraft. They threw all that force against the guerrillas in a war that lasted 2 years.
26th of July had a strong underground movement in the cities. There were sabotage efforts against the Batista government and demonstrations and so forth. The Batista government reacted very strongly. Bodies were left by the side of the road. Students, young people who were suspected of being rebel sympathizers were shot, or in some cases jailed and tortured. As a result of all that, public opinion turned massively against Batista.
An estimated 20,000 people were murdered by government forces during the Batista dictatorship. The rebels put out leaflets and a newspaper, and by 1958 also had a radio station keeping the people informed about developments. Fidel's interviews with foreign journalists ended rumors that he had been killed. Aware of the importance of the media, he made sure he was accessible to the press, even in English.
Our political philosophy is representative democracy and social justice in a well-planned economy.
Muchas de las cosas que hicimos están por encima de lo que nos imaginábamos en aquella época incluso. Y algunas cosas de las ocurridas han sido más difíciles también y más duras de las que nos imaginábamos en aquella época.
Yeah, I think it's often forgotten that when Fidel won and the revolution was successful, most people in the US saw it as a good thing. Not many people actually supported the Batista dictatorship. And Fidel had a lot of popularity, as we'll see later in the documentary, but Fidel had very large popularity among U.S. citizens, especially people of color living in the United States, because they saw his revolution as a revolution, among other things, as a revolution against racial segregation, which was still very much a big problem in the U.S. And, you know, Fidel overthrew the Batista dictatorship and ended racial segregation. Didn't end racism, of course. Racism was still a problem, and it's still a problem in Cuba that the government acknowledges. But, like, he was seen as, like, a Nelson Mandela figure, you know? And Nelson Mandela, of course, was a close friend of Fidel, and Fidel helped Nelson Mandela win and fight against the apartheid government in South Africa when the war with the Angola independent fighters began. But yeah, then the CIA propaganda machine, of course, started saying that Fidel was the devil incarnate and that he was gonna nuke the world and everything.
Yep.
The workers own their means of production in Cuba. There's no free market of cooperatives in Cuba. No, there are cooperatives. Most arable land is owned either by family farms or by agricultural cooperatives, but the state owns most larger workplaces and manages them usually through local elections. So the municipal election, the municipal assembly are usually it's usually the body that takes care of businesses, at least small to medium-sized businesses. But yeah, the model of socialism in Cuba is not like Titoism or market socialism, where you have a bunch of private companies that just happen to be owned by the workers, but in every other way are identical to private companies. There's no free market in Cuba.
Not even of ideas.
In January 1959, Fidel made a triumphal entry in Havana. It had taken 25 months to defeat Batista. With victory achieved, Fidel sought to make Cuba a united and independent nation.
Well, the answer is yes. Sambatsu.
I'll never forget that first speech that he gave a few days after he had entered Havana. I was watching on television, but they released a flight of doves, a symbol of peace. But one of the doves fluttered up into the air and landed on his shoulder. There was a gasp because the pigeon was the messenger of Oshun sent to
oh my God, Fidel Castro is Bernie Sanders.
Anointed one.
Todo el mundo se emocionó. Este un pueblo que en los años aquellos era muy creyente. El otro era más de.
And yeah, Sambatsu, I was trying to explain it to you, and then you kind of said you don't want an explanation, just a straight answer. Then I gave you a straight answer, and then you said, "How can that be?" When like I was literally trying to explain it to you, but you said you didn't want me to explain it. So. Whatever, I'm not going to get into it.
Sincretismo, ¿no? Las cosas africanas, las palomas, el pato. Ya a partir de allí, la gente pensaba que Fidel era el enviado de Cristo aquí, ¿viste?
Just 30 days ago, Fidel Castro entered Havana to be greeted by cheering mobs as one of the greatest heroes in Cuba's history. A week before that, General Batista and his top aides had fled the country, leaving it to Castro, his rebel army, and their supporters. Good evening, Fidel Castro. You must have had a very busy week. How do you feel?
Well, I really feel well, something tired.
I'm told that you saw your mother for the first time in 4 years this Christmas Eve. That must have been quite a reunion. What did she have to say to you?
She began to cry at the beginning, and that in several minutes she could not tell any word to me. Fidelito.
Hello, Fidel Jr.
Hi.
That's a very good-looking puppy you have there. Is he yours?
No, it's somebody gave it to my father for a present.
Uh-huh. When do you think you'll be visiting us again?
Oh, well, I should lie. I think when I have a chance.
Well, will that be with the beard or without it?
Well, it's possible if I go soon to the United States with the beard. Because I am not thinking now to cut my beard. Because I am accustomed to my beard. And my beard means many things to my country. When we have fulfilled our promise of good government, I will cut my beard.
The first people who left, I mean, in the first days after the revolution, by and large were Batista supporters and members of the Batista government. Batista fled the island New Year's Eve of 1959, and many of his supporters followed immediately.
The descendants of Batista are in Miami, Florida. I think her daughter is there. She's some kind of political activist, or maybe his granddaughter. They're all part of the Cuban diaspora and like the anti-communist movement in South Florida.
Thereafter,
those accused of murder and torture who didn't flee the country were brought to trial. The trials, however, were criticized in the U.S. media.
I was following on television the revolutionary trials that began right away, which were the beginnings of the problems with the United States. In fact, a lot of the CIA's people, or some of them at least, were on trial for having been murderers and torturers of Batista.
The same year he came to power, Fidel was invited to visit countries throughout Latin America.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine Cuba, Fidel comes to power, a bunch of the CIA agents that had supported Batista and had funded the death squads that were killing protesters. Now the CIA agents actually had to answer for their crimes and were put on trial. And like that's probably like part of the reason why the CIA is still holding a grudge against Cuba, which is pretty funny.
He made passionate speeches calling for unity among the peoples of that region. He proposed the creation of a Latin American market. Also in 1959, he embarked on a tour of the United States, hoping to promote a better understanding of the Cuban Revolution.
Did you ask for any economic assistance?
Not. Here, you in the United States are accustomed to see government coming from for money? Not. I came for good relations, for good understanding, for good economical relations. We are now poor country, but in a rich, poor people, but in a rich country. What we want is to work in our rich country.
Vice President Nixon was sent to meet the new Cuban leader after President Eisenhower refused to see him. Nixon later wrote a memo describing Fidel as a communist who should be overthrown.
Cuba is an obsession with American leaders, and it really doesn't matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans. It's almost a psychosis. The United States is simply incapable of dealing rationally with Castro.
When Fidel got to New York, he had a warmer welcome.
Okay, I got 2 questions in chat. Chiku asked if I've given my thoughts on the current state of affairs in Cuba. I feel like I probably have. I've made several videos about Cuba. Yeah, short answers, yes. Sienna, was this when the second Red Scare picked up in America? The second, I mean, if you think the first Red Scare was the anarchist in Chicago, right? The push for the 8-hour workday. The second Red Scare would have been against the communists, right? Now there was a bit of a Red Scare after the Bolshevik Revolution, but not that significant. Now, the big Red Scare with McCarthyism and everything picked up after World War II, so 1947-ish onward. So this is like 12, 13 years after the Red Scare has, started going full swing. So this is at the height of the Red Scare.
Miles de personas. Entra en la estación Pensilvania de Nueva York un joven abogado, alto y barbudo, que sabe hablar un idioma sencillo y valiente y que viste el uniforme de comandante del ejército rebelde cubano. Aquí esperan el mayor Wagner de Nueva York y su esposa, así como los altos dignatarios de la Babel de Hierro, para rendir homenaje al más ilustre visitante del momento, Fidel Castro.
Fidel gave a reception at the Cuban embassy.
Es la primera vez que él se pone el traje de gala. Se miró hacia el espejo y dijo que vaya, me quito esto porque me parezco a Tito, chico. Termina la recepción y no aparecía por ningún lado. Hasta que como a las 2 de la mañana llegó y nosotros sentados allá abajo en la embajada esperándolo. Digo, ¿dónde tú estabas? Dice, no, me fui al barrio chino a comer sopa china. En Nueva York solo esa noche, esas cosas que tiene.
In 1960, he traveled to the United States for a second time to address the General Assembly of the United Nations. When the manager of the Shelburne Hotel, worried about adverse publicity, asked him to leave, Fidel threatened to camp out on the grounds of the UN.
El dueño negro del Hotel Teresa, del barrio negro de Harlem, ofrecía el hotel, inclusive gratuitamente, a Fidel y a sus compañeros de delegación. Inmediatamente Fidel dijo, vamos para el Hotel Teresa.
Fidel Castro staying at the Hotel Teresa, and spoilers, he later goes on to meet Malcolm X at the Hotel Teresa. That's like, as far as I've heard, still like a very like important memory in Harlem to this day.
At the Hotel Teresa, world leaders visited him. Nasser from Egypt and Nehru from India. Black activist Malcolm X also called on him, as did the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev.
Aquí Khrushchev le está diciendo a la prensa, en contestación a una pregunta de si Fidel era comunista, dice, yo no sé si Fidel es comunista, yo lo que sí sé es que soy fidelista.
On his return to Cuba, the first priority of Fidel's revolution was the redistribution of land through the Agrarian Reform Act. Under Batista, foreigners had owned more than 70% of the arable land. Most of the sugar industry was in U.S. hands. At first, quite modest land expropriations were proposed. They even included land owned by Fidel's family.
Fidel quería que fuera la primera. Mi padre decía, tengo un hijo estudiando para abogado para que le defienda los intereses. Y bueno, pues mire, el abogado fue el que firmó la ley de reforma agraria.
Besides land redistribution, the reform included health care, education, housing, and road building in rural zones.
ya que nuestra reforma agraria afectó intereses de grandes compañías norteamericanas. A nosotros nos hacían la guerra por hacer la reforma agraria y en cambio después Kennedy estaba promoviendo la reforma agraria en América Latina para evitar revoluciones radicales.
Yeah, about a year after the agrarian reform was introduced, and some American properties, rural properties, the King Ranch and so forth, were nationalized, the Cuban government ordered the foreign refineries, two of which were American, to refine Soviet crude oil. I think their first inclination was to do it, but they were encouraged by the U.S. Treasury Department not to. So they refused. They would not refine the Soviet crude. The Cuban government then nationalized those refineries, the oil companies in Cuba. The United States retaliated for that by cutting off the Cuban...
Yeah, no, that's a big no-no when it comes to the United States of America. Nationalizing oil, that's like the number one thing you don't do.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, you could ask Iran about that one. You alright,
My
Crum?
goodness gracious. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just feeling a little foggy.
Yeah. You're up for being on stream, or?
I need to actually go make some food, I think. And just take a shower and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna dip out.
Yeah. Okay. Go make some food, take a shower, take a nap.
Will do.
Go get rested.
Take care, everyone.
Take care, girl.
Bye.
Yeah, I could hear my boy was tired. Gotta take care of yourself. Okay.
sugar quota, and Cuba then retaliated for that by nationalizing all U.S. properties in Cuba. And in October of 1960, the United States imposed the embargo against Cuba. So it was sort of one step led to another.
Cuando Fidel lee el decreto más importante de la Revolución Cubana,
en su afán de controlarlo todo,
la emoción de Fidel es tanta que Fidel enmudece, pierde la voz. Y aquello fue una expectación tremenda porque era ante las cámaras nacionales e internacionales y Fidel mudo delante del micrófono. Y entonces Raúl, inesperadamente, toma el micrófono y continúa leyendo el decreto de expropiación.
My channel is not a co-op, unfortunately. No, I mean, technically I'm not registered as self-employed or anything. I think legally I'm still just a student. So I'm not, it's not really, the channel is not really anything. Oh god, I was gonna say something, but I immediately forgot. I'm sorry.
De las grandes compañías norteamericanas en Cuba.
Porque se ha ido una voz por un momento, pero ahí está él y estará.
Compañía Cubana de Electricidad. United Fruit Company.
Yeah, I mean, just the scenes of like the Manhattan, Chase Manhattan Bank being seized and like the U.S. flag lowering and the Cuban flag being raised. It's very, very based. But I was gonna say the United Fruit Company is like one of the most evil corporations that have ever existed. Like, if you look up the United Fruit Company on Wikipedia, and they still exist today, I think Are they Chiquita Banana? Or are they Dole? I forget. United Fruit. I forget which one they became. Chiquita, yeah. United Fruit Company is today Chiquita. But yeah, when they were known as United Fruit Company, they would, they owned most of like the land in Central America, forced the farmers to grow, mostly bananas, right? And when presidents were elected in Honduras and in other Central American countries, there were all like various different attempts to do land reform, right? To take this land that was owned by an American company and actually give it to the farmers that were working the land, right? Like give it back to the people it should rightfully belong to. And when presidents like that were elected, companies like United Fruit Company or Chiquita, Dole, and these other fruit, Banana Republic conglomerates, they would go to the US and just say, hey, these guys are doing communism down here, so you better take care of that. And send in the CIA, fund some death squads, do a coup d'etat, install a military dictator. I think it was United Fruit that would hire a mercenary army, literally a private army, to do a military coup d'etat of I believe it was in Honduras, to overthrow the government and install a military dictatorship. Literally anarcho-capitalist shit. This guy's elected and he's trying to take away your land. Oh, just hire a bunch of mercenaries to overthrow the government. It's crazy stuff. So yeah, the United Fruit Company being nationalized, definitely a good move. They were probably, one of the American companies that were owning most of the land in Cuba, right? Michael Parenti told this story of the latifundia lands in the Escambray, although they existed everywhere, but they were privately owned land that people weren't allowed to cross, right? So you would have these companies like United Fruit Companies that would own just wide tracts of land across the entire island of Cuba. And if you lived in a village and someone was sick and you had to take them to a hospital, you couldn't go straight. You couldn't cross into this privately owned land because they would shoot you, they would kill you. So you had to go around, and that way it would take much longer to get to the hospital, and people would die most of the time on the way to the hospital because you just couldn't get there fast enough because all the land was bought up and was company property that you just weren't allowed to go on. Yeah, everything that existed was company property. Exactly. They were paying slave wages. Absolutely. And yes, the infrastructure was all built and owned by the companies. The roads were built by the companies and then therefore owned by the companies. Oh, Sebs sent me something. Oh, I see. Let me save that. Let's see. Where is it? Where did it go? There it is. Sebs made this. Although it's way too big. That's way too much popcorn. There, that's a good amount. Thank you, Sebs. Okay.
Central to understanding the Cuban Revolution is the relationship historically between Cuba and the United States. This was more than anything a nationalistic movement that Fidel was able to capitalize on, where the people in Cuba, from the founding of the country, had struggled for a sense of their own sovereignty and independence.
In addition to land reform, Fidel placed education at the heart of the revolution.
Sorry, I just want to repeat what I said before about I think it's a lot clearer to say anti-imperialist or anti-colonialist more than nationalist. Anyway, I did a whole spiel about that.
Thousands of young people set out for the most isolated parts of the island to teach the farmers to read and write.
A long time ago, Ro.
"1961 was declared the year of education. In the midst of false rumors that
they got the literacy rate in Cuba from I think below 50%. In the high 40s, I think it was, to 80 to 90% in about a year. It was insane how effective their literacy campaign was, and they really mobilized the entire country toward the literacy campaign, and they later used their experience in helping other countries in Latin America, especially in Central America, with their own literacy campaigns. So Nicaragua had a literacy campaign that Cuba was involved in. And yeah, Cuba, a lot of the time, they paid to help literacy campaigns in other countries, in their immediate neighbors. It's free of charge, not in exchange for anything, just to help people learn how to read. And to, foster solidarity, right, between Latin American countries.
the revolution would take children away from their parents, the U.S. State Department and the Catholic Church organized what was later called Operation Peter Pan, which airlifted 14,000 unaccompanied Cuban children to the United States.
Yeah, the Catholic Church
At the same
has done a lot
time,
of this
other Cubans
bullshit
left for the United States and joined the exile
throughout
community.
history.
The CIA began
They
to
did it in Canada.
plan the assassination of
And in the
Fidel
US.
and Raul and Che, whatever leadership they could get, but especially Fidel, so as to demoralize the Cuban people and make the Bay of Pigs invasion more likely to be successful.
In 1961, John Kennedy inherited the invasion plans
Yeah,
from
exactly, Mr.
Eisenhower.
Hanson.
He allowed it to go ahead, but vetoed the use of U.S. combat forces. As preliminary acts leading to the invasion, saboteurs burned thousands of acres of sugarcane, and the La Cubre, a Belgian freighter carrying arms, was blown up at a Havana dock. A second bomb was timed to explode as volunteers reached the burning ship to help the victims. Over 100 people were killed and hundreds more wounded.
Raul asks, were there any effective revolutionary activity in Haiti after the Cuban Revolution? The Haiti has had multiple attempts at, gaining sovereignty and kicking out America. None of them have really been very successful. I mean, there's still a protest movement in Haiti today, sort of aimed toward those anti-imperialist measures. Those protests have been going on for 3 years now. But yeah, like multiple points throughout the history of Haiti, they've had protests and organized movements and organizations trying to, just have democracy, right? Because for most of the 20th century, Haiti was a military dictatorship run by the United States. And it wasn't until 1991 that Haiti actually had their first democratic election. And in that election, they elected a social democrat who was going to do land reform. And so immediately the United States did a coup d'etat and installed a military dictator again, which is just very sad, but also funny. Just like the United States just finally being like, okay, you can do democracy now. Wait a second. You just elected the commie? All right, no more democracy for you. You're clearly not responsible enough yet. It's very American. Yeah, it's you're totally free to choose. You elect whoever you want, except those people that we don't want you to elect. In that case, you can't elect anyone. Yeah. No, Haiti has been kept as part of kept basically as a U.S. colony for a long time through military suppression of political organizations and suppression of democracy in general. You would have to ask a Haitian why the Cuban Revolution was successful, but there was never a successful Haitian revolution, except the original slave revolt, right? But like in the 20th century, there wasn't a successful Haitian revolution against American imperialism or colonialism. I don't really have the answer to that. You would, if you know a Haitian, I would ask them. Because I really couldn't tell you. I can't even begin to guess. They were in very similar conditions though, Cuba and Haiti. Very similar countries, like geopolitically in that way. Not culturally, they're not similar, but in their like material conditions and relations with the United States and European colonial powers and stuff, they're very similar.
Moreover, exiled Cuban pilots flying American planes painted with Cuban insignia bombed 2 airports, killing a number of civilians. Again, Fidel called on the Cuban people. On April 16, 1961, in a dramatic speech following the funeral of those who had been killed, he made one of the most important declarations in Cuban history.
Primero que empieza a preguntar, ¿están de acuerdo con la reforma urbana? Y entonces los de adelante se ven todos levantando el rifle y todo el pueblo atrás, ¿no? Entonces sí, todo el mundo levanta. ¿Están de acuerdo con la reforma urbana? ¿Están de acuerdo con la reforma de la enseñanza? ¿Están de acuerdo, con toda la revolución que se ha hecho en la enseñanza, en la salud? Sí, sí, sí. Entonces dice, esto que hemos hecho se llama socialismo.
Y que esa revolución socialista la defendemos con esos fusiles. Fidel dirigió personalmente las operaciones y rechazaba la petición de nosotros que se pusiera a un mayor resguardo, a una mayor distancia del frente de combate.
The Bay of Pigs invasion, which was launched from Nicaragua, ended in disaster. The forces directed by the United States met with intense, unexpected Cuban resistance, and the battle ended in 72 hours.
Yeah, I mean, the Bay of Pigs invasion is interesting because the United States, like the National Security Council and the CIA, when they were drafting plans for the Bay of Pigs, they essentially believed that, they sabotaged, right? They did some internal sabotage, right? They bombed the airport, they burned some sugarcane fields, basically tried to make life as miserable as possible for the Cuban people. And then they thought, well, as soon as, we're going to invade, we're going to have all these Cuban exiles, leading the invasion. And so as soon as we land in Cuba, all the poor oppressed Cubans living under brutal communism are just gonna lay down their arms and say, we surrender, please liberate us, and make things like they used to be. We love America and we love capitalism. And then they were basically like Pikachu face when the Cuban people actually took up arms and fought against the invasion. Because they genuinely thought that like as soon as the US showed up, everyone would just be like, oh yay, freedom is here. Turns out people didn't have a very positive view of the US. For some inexplicable reason. Maybe it was the segregation laws. Maybe it was the US companies owning 90% of the entire country and the economy. Maybe it was the piss poor conditions and the massive disparity between rich and poor, with like white Americans being the most wealthy and well off, with especially black Cubans being discriminately or statistically more likely to be living in terrible poverty. Who knows what it could be, but for some reason the Cuban people didn't like America very much anymore. Or, well, they never really did. Except the rich ones. The rich ones liked America. And still do. The Miami Cubans like America. Miami Cubans are like diehard Trump supporters. They're like super like anti-immigration, like they're like some of the most conservative people you'll find.
The captured Cuban exiles were later exchanged for baby food and medicine. In the mountainous regions, opposition groups financed by the CIA formed pockets of resistance against the revolution, but they were eventually overcome. The overt war against the country became a covert war against the man.
Yeah.
It was a long-running policy of the United States government, not just of the CIA, because they carry out the orders. They don't determine who's going to get assassinated. But they carry out the orders, and they had the orders from the higher-ups in the National Security Council and the Eisenhower and Kennedy and Johnson administrations.
¿Cuántos atentados habían contra usted?
Planes. Eso no cuentan los
atentados.
La sabré cuando llegue al cielo.
La CIA aparece todos los atentados de Fidel, con fusiles, embatido con el cénico, en cigarro, en pelo, en no sé cuántas cosas.
Siempre está protegido con su traje.
¿Cuál traje?
What suit? Sé que todo el mundo dice que usted tiene un chaleco a prueba de balas.
No. Voy a desembarcar así en Nueva York.
I will land in New York like this.
Tengo un chaleco.
I will land in New York like this.
Tengo un chaleco moral.
I have a moral one.
A moral
vest.
Qué fuerte.
It's strong.
Ese me ha protegido siempre.
That one has protected me always.
Es uno de los más intentados matar.
Yeah, no, that's just such a baller move, you know. Some Sigma shit. Yeah, exactly, Roll. Over 600 attempts were carried out to try to assassinate Fidel Castro in various different ways. Explosive cigars, poisoned milkshakes, like just a million different ways to try to kill the man. And he died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 90. It's just, I don't know how he did it. Like, the CIA is not incompetent, right? Like, the CIA has assassinated plenty of people. Plenty of, like, world leaders throughout history, like, especially in the 20th century, right? During the height of the Cold War, CIA went around killing people all the time. But, yeah, somehow Fidel managed to avoid getting assassinated his whole life, over 600 times. And yeah, like you said, probably unknowable just how many plans were actually drawn up. Here, I wanted to bring up this. I made a spreadsheet a little bit ago. Let's see. I don't know how well it can be seen. That's very zoomed out. But if you go on the website usaspending.gov, oh, failed to connect. Hey, is it down? Is the fucking is the U.S. government like shut down? Are they doing the thing where they shut down the government and all the? Why is USA spending not? Huh. Well, I guess that's it. The American government is gone. Anyway, yeah, there's a website called usaspending.gov that shows all of the different agencies giving money to different organizations. And I created a spreadsheet. I think it's mostly complete. I set up a few different criteria. I outlined it in a document that I don't have it open right now, but this is from 2008 onward. Different awards, so contracts or grants or cooperative agreements given to different organizations, mostly private organizations, to do various things in relation to Cuba. So most of these are like promote democracy in Cuba, promote human rights in Cuba in various different ways, right? The biggest one that's publicly available is this one, 2008 to 2012, given to Creative Associates International, who are well known for trying to do regime change in third world countries. Granted by the Office of Transition Initiatives, which their whole thing, their publicly stated reason for existing is to overthrow governments, right? That's $22 million in 2008, right? And then more recently, 2018 to 2021, $2 million U.S. aid for advancing human rights and democratic values. 2019 to 2020, by the federal prison system, some contract for $2.2 million. Non-secure juvenile services in Cuba, so detaining. I'm not exactly sure what this one was. I can't open it up because the website is down, which is unfortunate. Yeah, I can't look at that right now, but that's the code if anyone wants to look it up. Oh wait, it's cropped. Well, whatever. I'll fucking... Yeah, whatever. You can find it. International Republican Institute has gotten a fuck ton of money for their, grassroots civil society building program in Cuba. Cuba Civil Society program. It's all, very vague. There's no details on what exactly they'll be doing. But, yeah, it's, astroturfing, basically. Go to Cuba, set up a fake political organization, say you support democracy or whatever, and just advance U.S. foreign policy interest, and you'll get millions of dollars for it. There are a few that are still going to this day. Here's this one. It's not over yet. It's ending in 2022, signed in 2019, from USAID to Grupo de Apoyo a la Democracia, protecting human rights in Cuba. And then this one to 2023, so 2020 to 2023, a grant from the Foreign Assistance for Program Overseas, that's USAID, supporting human rights. This one ends in 2022. Also, protecting human rights. That's for $1,001. Protecting human rights. That's for another $1 million. This one ends in 2023. $730,000. Foreign assistance programs overseas promoting human rights in Cuba. That one goes to the International Republican Institute again. You see, a lot of these are just the same one over and over again. Let's see, can we sort this by Z to A to C? Let's see. Temporary filter. Yeah, here we go. So you can see a lot of these just get the money, like get grants over and over again. Do you think the US government would pay me top dollars spreading democracy in Germany? They probably do. Again, oh no, sorry, that's USAID. Sorry, USA spending. Is it actually down? Yeah, no, it actually is down. Wow. Well, if you go on usaspending.gov, you can search for Germany, and you should probably find a bunch of different programs with a vague description of promoting democracy in Germany. You should, yeah, there are most likely programs for doing that. The USAID has the it's not the Office of Transition Initiatives, but it's their counterpart, the something for stabilization, something. I forget exactly. But yeah. Canyon Communications LLC. These are the people, from what I can tell. Yeah, here they've gotten a bunch of grants from the Agency for Global Media. Basically, they've gotten a shit ton of money. What's that? Over $3 million, $4 million, somewhere around there, for setting up things like radio stations and TV programs, TV and radio segments in Cuba, advancing human rights and democratic values, motion picture, video production, teleproduction, other post-production services, production services in Cuba, international affairs, Office of Cuba Broadcasting, Radio, TV, Administrative Management, General Management Consulting Services, $22,000. Center for Democracy in the Americas, CubaNet News, and a lot of these ones, the links here, the links go to the parent organization, and it shows you, there's like a little drop down, and you can see that each one of these has changed their names like 1 million times. They never actually stick to one name. They like, all of these organizations go under a bunch of different names for whatever reasons. We've sponsored a number of TV series produced by young Cubans in Cuba, sharing how their generation is maintaining the idealism of the revolution and adapting it to the 21st century through entrepreneurship and expressive arts. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, that's that's how you do it, right? Is you pay like lip service to the revolution while you're saying, entrepreneurship and whatever, and then you get a bunch of money from the U.S. government for promoting human rights and democracy. Echo Cuba. There was also that one organization, so I forget the name of it, but they set up that social media platform that was, secretly run by the U.S. government, and spreading misinformation. Foundation for Human Rights, Freedom House, of course. They've gotten a shit ton of money, again, for Freedom House program in Cuba, Grassroots Civil Society Building Project, and so on. International Republican Institute, they have several grants. National Endowment for Democracy, that's technically, like, the National Endowment for Democracy is technically an agency of the United States. So this is the Department of State granting $7 million to an agency of the United States government, which I don't fully understand why it does that, and why the money can't just be raised through taxes or whatever. But yeah, the Department of State is giving a grant to an agency of the U.S. government. Advancing democratic rights, political pluralism, independent civil society. Political pluralism is just having multiple political parties, right? Cuba, of course, being a non-partisan democracy, that doesn't make a lot of sense until you realize that, no, this is about overthrowing the Cuban government and installing a dictatorship. U.S. Or a government aligned with U.S. foreign policy interests, which in Latin America is usually a military dictatorship. Where is it? Support to obtain a peaceful transition to democracy in Cuba. There was another one though. Where is it? Here, hastening the transition to democracy in Cuba. These are the ones. This one is hastening the transition to democracy in Cuba. It's $3.6 million. And support to obtain a peaceful transition to democracy in Cuba for $1.5 million. Those are the most explicit grants that I've found. That talk about just like that actually just make it clear in the description of the grant, like this is for overthrowing the Cuban government. Now the other ones are just a lot vaguer language, like supporting civil society, implementing democracy, supporting human rights. But yeah, those two are literally just like, no, go overthrow the government. The government is bad. Okay, we can remove this one here. 114,853,346 between 2008 and 2023. And this does not include Guantanamo Bay. So the Guantanamo Bay, what's Guantanamo Bay at? I think when I checked on USA Spending, I saw something like 2 billion something since 2000 and... No, that's not right. Is it 2 billion annually? I forget. No, I've forgotten already. But yeah, these numbers don't include spending on Guantanamo Bay, which is a shit ton of money. Because, I mean, everything related to the U.S. military costs a shit ton of money just because the military, like, you know... and yeah, exactly. This is what's available to the public. These are the grants that are publicly available. Most, or at least a good chunk of grants, are not publicly available, or they don't have a reason stated, or a place of implementation, or the receiver of the grant is anonymous. So all of those ones, what was I gonna say? Those ones aren't listed. What are the $6 million for detention if it isn't Guantanamo? It probably is Guantanamo, right? But the ones that are left out are the ones that are from branches of the military, right? So if you, on USA Spending, if you look at it when the website isn't down, you actually just have grants either to or from like the Navy and the Army and the, you know, various branches of the U.S. military, you know, contracts with private corporations or private contractors for doing repairs or doing this and that at the Guantanamo Bay facility. The ones that are listed here are ones that don't mention Guantanamo and that don't come from military branches of the U.S. So yeah, the ones that say that they are about truth about exploitation in Cuban industry, I don't know what that is. But yeah, the ones that are about detaining and everything, it's probably Guantanamo, but it doesn't say. Most of the information is not publicly available because the grants have been made available, right? And there has to be, like legally, there has to be a notion of what the money is going toward But the contracts, right, or the cooperative agreements, which is the most common form of grant from a U.S. Agency like USAID, for example, the cooperative agreements are contracts, and they are signed between the private contractor and the government agency that is giving out the money. And that contract, for the most part, is private or classified. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna post the link to the spreadsheet in the chat. Just give me a second. Okay, there it is. So you can look at that on your own time if you want. And yeah, again, whenever USA spending isn't down for maintenance, you can click on all the different links and you can see all the detailed information about them. All of the transactions have their little links, and all of the receivers, the companies, also have links to their parent organizations, so you can see the different names that they've gone, different names that they've gone under over the years, and how much money they've received in total from the U.S. Like International Republican Institute, Freedom House, they receive like hundreds of millions of dollars from the U.S. government or various different agencies of the U.S. government for doing, pro-democracy work, very vague and threatening sounding pro-democracy work in countries all around the world. Nigeria, there's been a lot of money going into promoting democracy in Nigeria. Of course, there was also a big protest, the End SARS protest in Nigeria. So, not to speculate, but I can imagine there are groups supporting or being part of the anti-SARS protests that have received funding by organizations like Freedom House and International Republican Institute. Just to kind of like push protests and that kind of thing in the direction of U.S. foreign policy. Actually, speaking of doing that, this is the last thing I'm gonna do before get back to the documentary. Office of Transition Initiatives. Okay, so this is the USAID website. This is the Office of Transition Initiatives. The Office of Transition Initiative supports U.S. foreign policy objectives by helping local partners advance peace and democracy. OTIs provides fast, flexible, short-term assistance targeted at key political transition and stabilization needs. Strategically designed for each unique situation, OTI has laid the foundation for long-term development by promoting reconciliation, jump-starting local economies, supporting emergent independent media, and fostering peace and democracy through innovative programming. Countries transitioning from authoritarianism to democracy, from violence to peace, or following a fragile peace, OTI's programs serve as catalysts for positive political change. And these are the engagement criteria. Is the opportunity or threat important to U.S. foreign policy interests? Is there a window of opportunity, a decisive shift in the political landscape that creates an opening to support viable local political will? Can CPS or OTI model bring a comparative advantage to support positive political momentum during the crucial period? Does the operating environment allow for CPS OTI system and processes to be optimized? 3 to 4 years average program duration, created in 1994. 1,750 average number of activities in a year worldwide. 3 average number of programs that open and close per year. And there should be quite a... Oh yeah, here they even have a little bit of a map, interactive map where you can click on countries. Oh, Cuba. Oh no, here, Latin America and the Caribbean. Okay. Cuba is surprisingly blank though, which I think is interesting. Because there are definitely grants from USA to organizations that are saying they're going to hasten... wait, yeah, hang on. Cuba is blank, but I could have sworn... Here it is. $22 million. Office of Transition Initiatives. To Creative Associates International. $22 million. That's the largest grant of all of these. Oh no, these are not... This is not a map of organizations. This is just a map of where the Office of Transition Initiatives is working. Is Vietnam blank too? No, there's something in Vietnam. USA helped Vietnam rewrite 150 laws and regulations affecting commercial activities. They helped Vietnam do market reform and opening up to foreign capital, probably. Laos. USAID helped Laos pass intellectual property rights to meet international standards, literally enforcing copyright laws in Laos. What is this one? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't open that on stream. Alright, look at that. Oh no, I can open this. Fidel Castro in Moscow, winter of 1964. That's cool. Anyway. Yeah. Here, I'll post the link to this map in the chat as well. In case you want to have a look around, see what's going on. Kosovo. Oh yeah, USA. The US spent a lot of money on Kosovo. Justice for Kosovo. Privatize an energy provider in Kosovo. Double its revenue by improving billing and collection. USAID helped privatize an energy provider. Why is that a thing that you're like proud of and displaying on your website? Establish an independent news portal in Macedonia to enable reliable reporting and encourage public dialogue. Yeah, just say propaganda, dude. Just say Radio Free Europe. Well, there's probably a lot of shit in Palestine, right? Palestinian inventor takes on the world. Palestinian family swipes away despair. Educator refuses to submit to crisis in Syria. An olive peace in the Middle East. Bridging a divide in the Middle East through friendship and sport. Okay. USAID supports 1/4 of all West Bank strawberry growers and all West Bank carrot farmers. I was supposed to click on the... Oh. This one? The one where he's on a... Is that it? Or... With this one? I mean, they're all nice pictures. Each of these dots are like a self-awarded participation trophy for imperialism. Yeah, exactly. Let's see, what do we got here? USA trains 6,000 educators to improve reading performance in Ghana's primary schools. Burkina Faso, USA provided 400,000 bed nests and 4 million malaria tests. 4 million bed nets. Yeah, see, this is not an exhaustive list of... this is by no means an exhaustive list of everything the USAID is doing, because I know for a fact that the Office of Transition Initiatives is currently active in Nigeria, and I'm pretty sure it's on the USAID website, just not on that particular page. Where is it? Nigeria. Here. Nigeria newsletter. I wonder Office of Transition Initiatives, Nigeria, Political Transition Initiatives, Strengthening Community Resilience and Conflict Prevention Mechanisms. Nigeria is one of the United States' strategic allies in sub-Saharan Africa, where the U.S. government supports Nigerian efforts to strengthen democratic institutions, promote good governance, counter corruptions, and improve security. Despite a successful democratic transition of power in 2015, Nigeria's structural problems increasingly manifest in violent conflicts across the country, including the rise of violent extremist organizations, criminal gangs, intercommunal violence. Nigeria witnessed deteriorating security and brazen attacks against civilians in the Middle Belt region. OTI programming helps communities affected by violence participate in the recovery of their towns and villages and work toward a more inclusive and secure future. Reducing violence and mediating conflict are crucial in identifying durable solutions for Nigeria's intractable security problems. Address community-identified priorities to build individual and community resiliency against conflict and violence, strengthening the ability of vulnerable individuals and communities to represent their interests and promote peaceful solutions to conflicts. This is not actually what I was looking for. It sounds extremely vague and doesn't actually say anything about what they're doing, but there was one that was specifically talking about was it Northern Ghana? Littorals. Oh yeah, this was it. There it is. Northern Ghana is home to a variety of conflict dynamics that could contribute to VEO expansion, such as intra-Muslim tensions, confluence of idle youth and lucrative illicit activities, and perennial land use and chieftaincy conflicts. Communities across northern Togo face a range of dynamics that contribute to instability and present potential opportunities for VEOs to take advantage of, including lack of state services, fear of security forces, distrust of Fulanis, numerous inter-ethnic land conflicts, and idle youth. Is idle youth just like a term for like lazy teenager? I'm not sure what idle youth means. Long and sparsely populated. Oh, hi, Claudia. Oh, no, I haven't finished the documentary yet. I'm sorry. I just got sidetracked. Fight against violent extremists and transnational terrorism. Violent extremist organizations have been active in the region for over a decade. Littoral states have been largely spared the brunt of the violence. What is VEO? Violent extremist organizations. Flexible program capable of working in remote communities. Yeah. Multimedia. Oh, it's just videos. Okay. Peace building. Recovering from crisis. Anyway, yeah. Moral of the story. The USAID spends millions of dollars to stabilize countries that are aligned with U.S. foreign policy interests and are allied with the U.S. and they spend millions of dollars to destabilize countries that are not aligned with the U.S. Not being involved in worthwhile activities. Yeah, whatever that means. Okay, let's get back to the documentary.
Pero parece que tiene 7 vidas como el gato. Porque siempre está parado.
And there's the fact that they haven't been able to kill him. I mean, that must really be upsetting, that they have not been able to kill this man who has persisted in being exactly who he is for all of these years against the mightiest power on the earth. It's quite phenomenal.
Faced with this massive hostility from the U.S., the giant, the Colossus to the north, who is he going to turn to protect his revolution? Sweden? India?
Hell yeah, Sweden will protect the Cuban Revolution.
There was only one other power on the globe that could provide any promise that that revolution perhaps could survive and last, and that was the Soviet Union.
Cuba threw in its lot with the Soviet Union. 1 year later, Khrushchev came up with a plan to install Soviet missiles on Cuban soil.
Luego los cohetes lograban el doble propósito, fortalecer el poderío del campo socialista y también disuadir a los Estados Unidos de un ataque a Cuba porque devendría en una guerra nuclear.
Castro reluctantly agreed to accept the missiles, but then he said, at least if you're going to deliver the missiles, make it a public act. But Khrushchev thought he could do it clandestinely and it would spring it on the Americans.
U.S. spy planes discovered the missiles, which brought the Soviet Union and the United States to the brink of nuclear war. The crisis ended when the president's brother, Robert Kennedy, negotiated a secret deal with Khrushchev. The Soviet Union would remove the missiles if the United States withdrew its missiles from Turkey, and later promised not to invade Cuba.
When Khrushchev then took the missiles out without the courtesy of notifying Castro or consulting with him, Castro was furious.
To mend relations between the two countries, Fidel was invited to visit the Soviet Union. His personal friendship with Khrushchev was also restored.
I was here and Khrushchev was here. And I don't know what animal was coming, and I shot in this direction. It was about 10 meters away in front of Khrushchev. That Khrushchev, who was a farmer, you know, he was a peasant. I just remember that Khrushchev did like this. Saying, what kind of man have I brought here? I hardly saved my life. And you know what crossed my mind at that moment? What will happen if in one of these hunting adventures, if in an accident, I kill Khrushchev?
Oh my God.
You can imagine what would have happened?
Well, he was caught in somewhat of a difficult dilemma. Pragmatically,
Cheney learned from this.
Needed the support of the Soviet Union because economically they were completely dependent. So he then constructed a relationship with the Soviet Union where he was constantly looking for ways to assert independence from the Soviets, particularly in the foreign policy arena.
There were earth-shaking changes about to happen, and Fidel's ability to give expression to those historical changes allowed him to emerge as the sort of representative of the possibility of third world countries, you know, moving away from the capitalist orbit toward a different kind of future.
The Cuban Revolution, with Fidel and Che at its head, became an inspiration to others seeking political change in Latin America.
Ahora sí, la historia tendrá que contar con los pobres de América, con los explotados y vilipendiados de América Latina, que que han decidido empezar a escribir ellos mismos para siempre su historia.
After a dramatic insurgent experience in the Congo, Che led a guerrilla group in the Bolivian jungle. On October 8, 1967, they were ambushed. Che, who was wounded in the fighting, was taken prisoner and murdered the next day. Members of the Bolivian army threw his body and those of his comrades into a secret grave.
Si queremos un modelo de hombre que no pertenece a este tiempo, un modelo de hombre que pertenece a los tiempos futuros, de corazón digo que ese modelo es el Che.
Fidel continued to support struggles all over the world.
Queremos brindarle al pueblo de Vietnam nuestra más decidida solidaridad y apoyo.
In Vietnam, where Ho Chi Minh led a popular liberation movement, Cuba sent sugar, rice, and blood donations, and trained doctors, engineers, teachers, and agricultural workers.
Fidel se lamentaba no haber conocido a Ho Chi Minh. Según
See,
Fidel.
See this guy? See this guy right here? That's Sloan Oi's grandfather. Not a lot of people know that.
Se lamentaba no haber conocido a Ho Chi Minh. En un gesto así de impotencia.
Yeah, no, I was the guy next to him.
Fidel hace así y da unos pasos para adelante, para atrás, y hace así y dice: porque lo que no me perdonaré nunca, haberme demorado el poquito de tiempo que me demoré en llegar a Vietnam, que no me permitió conocer a Ho Chi Minh. Eso no me lo perdonaré nunca, Melba, no haber conocido a ese hombre tan gigante que tú sí conociste.
No. In 1970, Allende's Chilean Revolution offered another model of change. The peaceful road to socialism. Fidel made a supportive tour of the country.
En Chile está ocurriendo un proceso único, insólito. Es un proceso revolucionario donde los revolucionarios tratan de llevar adelante los cambios pacíficamente. Al pueblo chileno que siempre estuvo y estará junto al pueblo de Cuba y a su proceso revolucionario.
For the United States, the Chilean road to socialism was no more acceptable than the Cuban one. In 1973, the CIA backed a coup by General Pinochet, which led to President Allende's violent death. Cuba backed the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, who were victorious in 1979. The assassination of his friend Maurice Bishop in Grenada was a great blow to Fidel. Internal divisions in Grenada opened the way for the United States to invade. Cuban construction workers were caught in the middle, and some were killed and wounded.
So many sad moments.
With the change of the political climate in Latin America, Fidel visits Ecuador.
Ha habido muchos cambios en los últimos 25, 30 años en el hemisferio. Yo diría sí que tenemos más conciencia que nunca de nuestra identidad y de nuestra independencia.
30 years after Che Guevara was murdered in Bolivia, his remains and some of those who fought with him were finally found and returned to Cuba. Their families were at the airport. Che's daughter, who was 5 years old when he left, and the man with whom he is always identified, paid tribute to him and his guerrilla comrades.
Hace más de 30 años, nuestros padres se despidieron de nosotros. Partieron para continuar los ideales de Bolívar, de Martí, un continente unido e independiente. No volvimos a verlos. En esa época, la mayoría de nosotros éramos muy pequeños. Ahora somos hombres y mujeres, vivimos, quizás por primera vez, momentos de mucho dolor, de intensa pena. Hoy llegan a nosotros sus restos, pero no llegan vencidos. Vienen convertidos en héroes, eternamente jóvenes, valientes, fuertes.
The woman speaking is Areida Guevara, who is the... now I can't remember if she is the granddaughter or the daughter of Che Guevara. She might be the daughter. I think she's the daughter of Che. Let me check. Yeah, she's the daughter of Che. I already saw the daughter. No, that's her. It's Aleida Guevara. It's the same person.
Audaces. Nadie puede quitarnos eso. Siempre estarán vivos junto a sus hijos, en su pueblo. Hasta la victoria siempre, patria o muerte.
Muchas veces he soñado, yo a veces le he contado a la gente las cosas que uno sueña. Y he soñado que estoy hablando con él, que está vivo. Una cosa muy especial, ¿no? Una persona que no le cuesta mucho trabajo resignarse a la idea de su muerte. ¿Y a qué obedece eso, a mi juicio? Que tiene una presencia siempre tan permanente en todo.
If I was writing history, I would write about the way in which Fidel, as the leader of one of the smallest countries in the world, helped to shape the destinies of millions of people across the globe.
Yo creo que él ha llenado un capítulo muy intenso en la historia de Cuba y en la historia de América Latina. Durante este tiempo, él condujo a Cuba a ser como la conciencia crítica en este continente.
It's not just Castro the man, he carries with him a meaning, a signification, which is of tremendous importance to people like ourselves who are the marginalized of the world.
Can I just say that guy? What is...
It's not just Castro the man.
Rex Nettleford, Vice Chancellor, University of West Indies. He has the most wonderful accent that is this mix of Caribbean and just very posh British.
He carries with him a meaning, a signification which is of tremendous importance.
Listen to how he said signification there. Sorry, this is a very weird tangent. Sorry for pausing it for this, but like when you first hear him talk, it sounds like he's speaking with a very posh British accent, but then he doesn't. It's like there's a bit of Caribbean in there.
A meaning, a signification which is of tremendous importance to people like ourselves who are the marginalized of the world.
I'm just very fascinated by accents and the ways people talk.
And Africa as a mother country to so many Cubans needed to be addressed as part and parcel of the worldwide thing of African liberation.
Right from the beginning, Cuba's revolutionary ideals not only spread throughout Latin America, but also forged strong ties with national liberation leaders, such as Sékou Touré, Amilcar Cabral, Julius Nyerere, Samora Machel, and Agostinho Neto.
Cuando se produce la invasión de Angola por tropas regulares de África del Sur, no podíamos cruzarnos de brazos. Y cuando el MPLA solicitó nuestra ayuda, le ofrecimos la ayuda necesaria.
In 1975, as Angola moved towards independence from Portugal, the CIA, along with the apartheid government of South Africa, tried to bring down the new Angolan government. At the request of the Angolan president, Fidel sent 36,000 troops to keep the South African forces from attacking Luanda, the capital. For many Cubans, whose ancestors were African slaves, the fight in Angola was a way to repair a debt to history.
Ustedes son los del regimiento, ¿verdad? ¿Qué tiempo llevan por acá?
No, llevo poco tiempo.
Poco tiempo. ¿Tú de dónde eres?
Santiago.
¿Pero tú?
Santiago, Cuba.
Veo muchos santiagueros aquí, este regimiento me hicieron de santiaguero. ¿Y tú de dónde?
Ciego de Ávila.
Ciego de Ávila.
In 14 years of war, over 300,000 Cubans, doctors, teachers, and engineers, as well as soldiers, played an important role in Angola. More than 2,000 lost their lives. In 1988, Fidel sent in more Cuban troops for the decisive battle at Quito Cuanavale and directed...
Yeah, the war between South Africa and Angola was one of the decisive moments in Southern African anti-colonial history, where you had the CIA, the United States, the apartheid South African regime, and Rhodesia, which was an ethnic, like ethno-state colony, right? One of the worst colonies in terms of racial discrimination and like you just pure vitriolic hatred toward the native African peoples living within those borders. They were all fighting on the same side against the insurrectionists, is what they call them, the the Freds, the violent insurrectionists, the you know, these people who were most often communist, which is why the CIA was involved, of course. But these, you know, independence organizations, independence struggles in Angola, in Mozambique, and in South Africa, they symbolized the threat of not only black majority rule in these colonial states in Southern Africa, but they also symbolized a threat to U.S. hegemony in Africa, because you know, these African states, a lot of these organizations that were fighting for independence and for an end to colonialism, they had socialist leanings, which is fairly natural, right? Considering that you had landlords, white landowners and capitalists who were owning the vast majority of the land and the productive property in these colonial states. And so it was a very natural reaction to that level of inequality and the level of power that the rich white minority had to pick up arms and fight for socialism. And that, of course, scared the United States, because that's going to mean that the Soviet Union is going to get a bunch of new allies in Africa, and the Soviet Union are going to be the ones who have access to the natural resources in these countries, right? And it's not going to be the United States anymore, because the United States, of course, was allied with these colonies. It wasn't the UK fighting. The UK was there, of course, fighting, but the UK weren't the ones putting in the most effort to keep these colonies. It was the United States that were the most fervent about fighting the pro-independence movements in specifically, or most exceptionally, in Southern Africa, but really all across Africa as well, Sub-Saharan Africa, at least in Western, Central, and Eastern Africa. Like the threat of socialism in these in Africa was large enough that the CIA made it one of their top priorities to suppress independence movements in Africa and to support the colonial regimes, support apartheid South Africa and Rhodesia and the like. But Cuba sending aid to the Angolan independence movement and fighting against apartheid South Africa, fighting against the CIA and Rhodesia and all these pro-colonialists, and winning that war, and winning independence for Angola, and later winning independence for Mozambique, that was a turning point in history, right? Because it's largely thanks to South Africa losing that war, that you could have someone like Nelson Mandela come in and win an election and end apartheid peacefully, right? It wasn't really peaceful. It took a war for it to happen, right? But that's the background for the end of apartheid in South Africa. There is this simplified view that's often taught in the West that South Africa was under apartheid until everyone in the world grew a conscience and started boycotting South Africa. And then Nelson Mandela came and he was like, I'm gonna be peaceful and I'm gonna end racism because that's bad. And then that's how apartheid ended. But it was a long and bitter and violent, oftentimes violent struggle against apartheid in South Africa. It was not a peaceful time where you just had this one guy stand up and say, excuse me, I'd like to end racism, please. And the whole world just collectively went, yeah, okay, that's fine. The war against Angola and losing that war against Angola really was one of the key factors in apartheid ending when it did.
Operations from Cuba. The defeat of the South African army drove a large nail into the coffin of apartheid and helped advance the struggle of the South African people.
Exactly. That's what I just said.
Una derrota en aquellas condiciones hubiera podido significar el fin de la Revolución Cubana. Y todo eso ocurrió después del 75. Pero hay que reunir todo el material y eso. Pero nosotros no hemos escrito ni siquiera la historia de la Revolución Cubana.
Had it not been for the Cuban presence in Africa, and in particular in Angola, the history of Africa would have never been what it is now. One of the greatest friends that Cuba has is Nelson Mandela and his appreciation for what the Cuban people did and Fidel Castro. But I think if you don't understand that history, then you'll never really understand the enormous success and the importance of the Cuban Revolution.
Well, my president,
My president.
My brother. Presidente, my brother.
Bye, Neil Florian.
How are you?
My brother.
Please. Please. Very nice to see you.
Están contentos de verlo.
Please sit down.
Están contentos. Por favor, tenga bien sentarse.
Please sit down.
Siéntese.
Now, one thing before we say anything.
Una cosa antes de hablar, nada.
Before we say anything.
Antes de hablar absolutamente de cualquier tema,
you must tell me when you are coming to South Africa.
Me tiene que decir cuándo viene para Sudáfrica.
You say, no, just a moment.
No, un momentito.
Es seguro, si ya yo recibí.
The sooner the better.
And we have had a visit from a wide variety of people.
Una gran cantidad de personas.
And our friend Cuba,
y nuestro amigo
Mr.
Cuba,
Hanson,
which helped us in
sorry,
training our people,
que nos ayudó a entrenar a nuestra gente,
gave us resources to get on with our struggle,
que nos ayudaron tanto en nuestra
trained
lucha,
our people
que
as
entrenó a nuestros
doctors and so
combatientes, a
on.
nuestros médicos.
You have not come to our country.
Cuba no ha venido a visitarnos, usted no ha ido a visitarnos.
When are you coming?
¿Cuándo viene?
No he visitado a mi patria surafricana.
I haven't visited my South African homeland
La
yet.
quiero como una patria.
I love it as a
Quiero por
homeland.
él y por el pueblo.
I love it as a homeland as I love you and the South
When
African
are you
people.
coming to South
Pero
Africa?
¿cuándo viene
When?
Sudáfrica?
Creo que va a tener que ser hoy mismo. Va a
I
tener
think it
que
will have to be today. I will have to fly back with you.
No, you are very
Él
soon.
se va a las 10.
You are leaving at 10, so we are catching the plane together.
Soon afterwards, Fidel did go
Yeah,
to
that
South
was very
Africa
cute.
and on his way stop off in Namibia, where he was greeted by Sam Nujoma, the nation's leader.
Welcome to the Republic of Namibia,
Bienvenido a la República de Namibia.
the country which you helped to liberate, to be liberated.
In South Africa, Mandela was waiting. Fidel was invited to address the South African Parliament.
Conviértase Sudáfrica en modelo de un mundo futuro más justo y más humano.
Let South Africa be a model of a more just and more humane future.
Si ustedes pueden, todos podemos.
If you can do it, we will all be able to do it.
Fidel is linked to the post-colonial era as the figure who, more than any, I think, symbolizes independence and sovereignty of small nations, shaking off the yoke of the imperial powers, and the fact that he has been there for as long as he has and has been able to magnify his role to really a global force from this tiny island base.
It is easy to build a nation. It is far more difficult to shape a society. And this is what Cuba is doing. It will need all the time in the world. It will need all the humility, all the meekness, all the generosity of spirit to itself and to others to emerge.
In the 70s and 80s, Cuba's battleground on the home front was the economy. Tremendous efforts were made to industrialize the country and create shared wealth in spite of the continuing U.S. blockade. Cuba was dependent on a single crop, sugar. The Soviet Union promised to buy as much as could be produced. Fidel tried to spur the country on through personal example in the attempt to reach new harvest levels.
Salir de su desarrollo es una tarea titánica, realmente. Y salir del subdesarrollo en las condiciones de Cuba todavía más bloqueada por Estados Unidos.
The paradox of Cuba's independence, depending on support from the Soviet Union, involved Fidel in a balancing act that lasted 30 years. Help from the Soviet Union made it possible for Cuba to maintain its advances in universal education and healthcare, and to promote sports and scientific development, as well as greater industrial diversification.
Yes, Brezhnev had a unibrow.
The government of Fidel Castro has shown a world that is teeming with billions of impoverished people that it is possible for a very poor country emerging from sickness and ignorance and corruption and poverty of a Batista regime to, within a few short years, educate all of its children, to create a system of education that is comprehensive, that reaches the entire society, that abolishes illiteracy, that is capable of export to other countries to help them learn to read and write and grow and know.
By the mid-1980s, Fidel began to perceive problems in the economy and industry. Supplies of goods became sporadic, and there was growing corruption. The Cuban dream of an egalitarian society was in danger. Fidel's response to the crisis was to personally oversee every aspect of Cuban society. He criticized, cajoled, and reorganized in his own unique style. Even during the most difficult crises, Fidel has always emphasized the development of sports. Cuba now ranks among the top 10 countries in Olympic medals.
Under Fidel Castro, Cubans became famous as artists, as filmmakers, as writers, as baseball players, as boxers, as scientists, and as soldiers. So he took a country and he made them somebody, and there was a cost. And that's the part I think that the American press and certainly his critics emphasize.
Top 10.
Cubans
I don't
answer
know
American
if that's true
critics
anymore,
who say
though.
they don't show sufficient respect for human rights by saying they respect
This
the most
is a
basic human
20-year-old
rights,
documentary at this
providing
point.
health care, enough to eat, a place to
Let's,
sleep.
actually, let's look that up, actually. Let's see. Countries by Olympic. All-time Olympic game medal table. Combined total. Cuba's Cuba's right here, actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 for all medals total. And let's see, combined total of gold medals. They are here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 21. They're 21st in gold medals now, since the documentary came out in 2001. They have dropped if they were in 10th place. That is still a lot of medals. Yeah. 85 gold medals in total. More gold medals than Austria, Poland, Bulgaria, New Zealand, More gold medals than Spain. That's a fucking dunk on colonialism if I ever saw one. Spain itself has fewer gold medals than Cuba. Denmark, Belgium, Turkey, Ukraine, Greece, Czech Republic, South Africa, Jamaica. Really? Wow. More than Ireland. More than Portugal. More than Chile. More than Vietnam. More than the UAE. Netherlands, Antilles. I didn't even know they competed. The Virgin Islands have the fewest. Might have been only Summer Olympics. Who has... Norway has the most gold medals in Winter Olympics. That makes sense. Where does Cuba rank when it's gold in winter? Probably pretty far down, considering they're a Caribbean country. Wait, where is Cuba? Cuba, 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 Cuba. Cuba, que linda es Cuba. Oh, they're pretty high still. Oh, no, wait, no. They have 0. Wait, what? How does that make any sense? I'm sorting by... Oh, I see. Okay, so they... Okay. Got it. Okay, so everyone below here has 0. Okay. Got it. Wait, what about... Oh, no, they have 0 total. I guess they just never participated in Winter Olympic Games, maybe? What's your take on the sonic attacks? No, I mean, the whole claim is pretty ridiculous. I don't think Cuba has secret space age technology that makes people feel nauseous for no reason by using speakers. How far up are they on Summer Olympics? Gold medals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. They're in 18th place by gold medals in the Summer Olympics. With 85 gold medals. Oh wait, it's his number right there. Yeah, 85 gold medals. What are your thoughts on almost 60 years of single family rule in Cuba? What, the Bacardi family? Yeah, it was colonialism was a very bad time. I mean, you had racial segregation laws, you had terrible poverty, especially poverty that was indiscriminate or discriminate against people of color. I mean, you had just gambling and prostitutions, and basically the entire Cuban economy was set up for the benefit of rich white Americans. Cuba was more or less a colony of the United States for a very long time. And yeah, like you say, single family rule, like the Bacardi family more or less was running the entire country. I mean, as well as, of course, American corporations and conglomerates that were owned most of the companies and most of the land. Vast majority of the land actually was owned by Americans or American companies. So yeah, it's very sad. Anyway.
The basic needs of life. And as for civil rights, they respect those also, they say, but that they will not tolerate anything against the revolution because a revolution is supported by the people.
Claro que la mayoría del pueblo apoya la revolución, la gran mayoría, no la mayoría, la gran mayoría. Como ejemplo máximo de este apoyo, las elecciones nuestras, que son elecciones abiertas, democráticas y populares, verdaderamente populares. Porque, por ejemplo, yo he sido elegido en 2 ocasiones como diputado a la Asamblea Nacional del Poder Popular. Y yo soy un escritor, un intelectual, no soy un político, tampoco soy militante del Partido Comunista.
Yo soy partidario de la libertad de expresión.
Yeah, I used that clip in one of my videos.
Pero comprendo que la libertad de expresión y la pluralidad de partidos es difícil frente a un país que está permanentemente acosado por un vecino que está a 90 millas. Entonces eso es producto de la actitud defensiva del pueblo, del gobierno de Cuba.
And then came an unexpected blow, one that will change life on the island, the collapse of the Socialist Bloc. Gorbachev had traveled to Cuba in 1989 to sign new trade agreements, but within months the Soviet system had collapsed and the agreements were worthless. Fidel's revolution now faced its toughest challenge since the early days in the Sierra Maestra.
And I mean, if you're wondering why the Russian Federation, a successor state to the Soviet Union, didn't simply continue with the same economic relations, commercial ties that they had had with Cuba until the special period, the simple answer to that is that the Russian economy, almost immediately upon the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the changing of the planned economy very swiftly, in a very uncautious manner, switching over to a free market private economy caused a very great recession in the Soviet Union. The economy crashed, and there was a lot of poverty. Drinking went through the roof. Suicides were at an all-time high. Russia was in crisis for about a decade after the collapse of the Soviet Union. In many ways, they haven't recovered from the collapse of the Soviet Union to this day, right? Even though a lot of time has passed and a lot of efforts have been made to restore the economy, right? You still, if you ever go to Russia, especially if you go to smaller towns, you'll see all the theaters and the parks and things, these things that were built for the public good, not for profit incentive, right? Things that were built to support communities. They are falling apart if they can't make money, right? So, you have these old community centers and halls and parks and monuments and, community swimming pools and theaters and all these places that were built in pretty much every town across the Soviet Union. They're all, abandoned and falling apart because, well, they're not profitable. No private company wanted to buy them and operate them because there was no profit to be made. So you still, you're still suffering, even if the GDP is going up, you're still suffering from a lot of problems caused by, the upheaval of the lives of the people in the former Soviet Union, right? Where you used to have things that could support self-sustained communities that now all of a sudden they can't rely on themselves or their own production anymore. And you have a lot of people trying to move into larger cities instead of living where they had lived for generations. Did the workers own their means of production in the USSR? Yes. I could also interpret this counter argument as being basically single-family rule for far longer than 60 years. Socialist single-family rule period has been far more successful. I wouldn't call it single-family rule. Yeah, Fidel was prime minister, I think about 10 years. I think in total, when you think about like the years he had political power, I would give him maybe 14 years. After that, you know, self-admittedly, he didn't really do anything. He rubber-stamped decisions made by the Council of State. He was the head of state, right? But decisions didn't really come from him. And as the years went on, Cuba adopted new constitutions. The amount of responsibility put into the head of the Council of Ministers diminished. The Council of State, not the Council of Ministers. And a lot more positions were popping up, centering around the Parliament, the National Assembly, where you now had a larger number of people who were sharing the responsibility and moving further and further away from the president having much political power at all. But there's also the unspoken, what's the word that anarchists use? Unspoken hierarchy, or the unofficial hierarchy, where someone can have power and influence not through legally having power and influence, but simply through the authority that they project and the respect that they have, and how much people in power listen to you, right? So if you are a figure that people in power listen to, and you say, let's do this, then that is usually what happens. So there's an anarchist criticism to be made there about people having too much political influence, even if they don't legally have much political power. But that's a story for a different time. The workers in North Korea own the means of production. That's a difficult question, because a lot of the information about North Korea is filtered through South Korea, and it's difficult to find too much reliable information about how North Korea works internally. Economically, as far as I know, North Korea has a similar system to China, where they have a social market economy with heavy state involvement. They also have a special economic zone where they allow more or less not unregulated but less regulated private enterprise. And that's how was the Cuban press ? How was the Cuban press? What do you mean? The Cuban press, like the newspapers and stuff? Cuba has a lot of media outlets, websites and forums where people can write articles and comment on articles and stuff. Pretty much every union, every organization, like the Women's Federation, the students' unions, the small farmers, and so on. They all have their own media outlets. Some of them have radio programs. Pretty much all of them have their own, at least weekly magazines. I would argue the workers in most Western countries have more impact on their means of production than any of your socialist countries. That's interesting. I would love to hear that argument. I find it hard to believe people working in an Amazon warehouse have any say in what they do or why they do it or well how much they're paid. In every workplace in Cuba, there's a union representative that works there full time, and their whole job is basically to take complaints by workers there and then immediately, so that there's as little time as possible between incidents happening and the union getting involved, right? So a union rep is always present at the workplace, meaning that any mistreatment of workers by bosses is seen immediately by the union rep, instead of the union rep having to rely on reporting by the workers themselves, right? The workers having to actually physically go to the union and say or make a report of what happened. Instead, there actually just is a permanent member of the union that's always there to represent the interests of the workers. And all the workplaces are more or less managed by the municipal assemblies. And I have a whole video. Talking about democracy in Cuba. If you're interested in especially the municipal elections, I think I go most in depth about the municipal level elections. But it's fairly easy to be elected to the municipal assembly. A lot of regular people are elected to the municipal assembly. You're not paid a special wage for being a member of a municipal assembly. You're expected to stay at your normal job and carry out your political duties on your free time, which you have in Cuba because they have labor regulations, so you don't actually have to work all day. And everyone knows who their local representative is because it's someone who is elected from neighborhood assemblies. So the people who are in charge of running and managing the means of production are people who are directly elected by the people who live in a certain municipality, in a certain local region. And political representatives can, at any time, for any reason, be recalled by the people who elected them. So if a politician or multiple politicians are doing something that the people in that municipality don't want them to do, and they feel that their interests aren't being represented by the municipality, then they can simply do a recall and say, get these people out of here, we need new representatives, at any time for any reason. So having municipal control of the means of production ensures that not only the workers who work in a workplace have control over the means of production, but actually everyone who lives in that area who are affected by how the business is run, right? Because, when you go, like the people who go to a grocery store, they're affected by how that grocery store is run and what their policies are. It's not just the workers at the grocery store who are affected by what the policies are, right? Everyone in a community is affected by how the means of productions are handled. So the control, even if the workers have their right to be heard through and have the right to be represented by a union, and their working conditions are a top priority, the control of the means of production is handled at the municipal level, because that way you include the entire community and not just the individual workers at the single workplace, right? If you understand the logic behind that. Do you think private companies run stuff in the African countries you're talking about? Yes. Private companies have a lot of influence in Africa. DRC, for example. Really, most of Africa, private companies and corporations, multinational conglomerates, especially from Europe, or especially from America and Western Europe, they influence political policies. We were looking at that earlier, the US aid map. We were looking at the map where they were like showing proud, oh, here's this electrical company that we privatized, and this thing, like this wall of participation trophies that the USAID government agency was showing off, like here's all the shit we privatized, and like here's all the countries that we helped improve by making capitalism happen. Do you know where I can get trustworthy information on Cuba and their current situation? I mean, there are a bunch. I mean, do you mean like news outlets? Oh, hey, Keelan Ideal. Thank you for waiting with a party of 3. If you have Telesur, which is they're owned by several Latin American governments to provide news, primarily in Spanish, but they also have Telesur English. Then, hey, Sword Fighter. Then, if you're looking for Cuban sources, you have Cuba Debate, which is more of a forum where you get a lot of articles and stuff by various professionals in different fields talking about stuff that's going on. If you want like political opinion from the Communist Party itself, they have an official paper called Granma. They have an English version as well. And then the Women's Federation in Cuba, they have a news outlet that's about feminism and women's interests in Cuba, and what they're doing and what they're pushing for to improve the lives of women in Cuba. Small farmers. I'm not sure they have an online publication, Small Farmers Association, but there's the Confederation of Trade Unions. I think they have a newspaper in Spanish. I don't think they have an English version. The students' unions are pretty good. I think pretty much all the students' unions at all the different universities have their own news publication. Does socialism require the erasure of the profit motive? It doesn't require it. Depends on what you mean. Profit motive is a pretty bad motivation, though. I mean, profit motive, like, if you're earning a wage, is that a profit motive? Or are you talking about, like, entrepreneurship? Because, I mean, if you abolish private property, then there's no profit motive for private entrepreneurs to be private entrepreneurs, because they can't, because private property is abolished. So it depends on what you mean by profit motive and at what scale, right? Are you talking about the micro scale, about the individual motivations, or are you talking about the macro scale, like a government's motivation for doing things? Because in the West, obviously, we have governments that motivate policies and reforms by saying this is going to make the country a bunch of money, this is going to help the economy grow. And under socialism, you tend to have countries saying we need to do this because people are hungry, or we need to do this because people are illiterate. We need to do this because, like, we need to make people's lives better. So in that sense, the profit motive tends to disappear from the government. If you had an economic system of co-ops that compete among each other, just like privately owned companies do right now, is that socialism? No, not really. It is what you might call, it is a private free market. It's a system of capitalism where you've replaced the capitalist with oligarchs or oligarchies, right? Small collective groups of people that, instead of being an individual who owns capital and makes decisions on behalf of the people, you have groups of people that own capital and makes decisions on behalf of people. But a worker cooperative is still not accountable to the general public. Like, the general public can't vote to have a co-op stop clubbing baby seals or stop polluting the rivers, right? Co-ops are still private entities that are beholden to making money for themselves, and they do that by competing with everyone else. So they have an incentive to undermine their competition and to make as much money about themselves instead of actually trying to make life better for people. And they'll, spend their money and time and effort in trying to make as much profit for themselves instead of providing as good a service as possible. The general public are the workers in the co-op, right? Right. But you don't have... The general public is not the workers in all of the co-ops simultaneously, right? I can work for a company and be part of a co-op, but if I work for company A, I will have no saying in what the policies of company B are, even though I consume the products that company B makes. My life is impacted by how company B is run, but I have no say in their policies or what they do. Only the theoretical power that I have over them as a consumer. But we all know voting with your wallet is a very undemocratic way of voting because some people have more votes than others. That's how wallets work. They vary in size. How does your society figure out what company is the most ideal? Well, you set goals for communities. Like, we're going to provide everyone with clean water, and you have a public company and you tell them, do that. And if they do a bad job, then the people who are in charge can be voted out. Or the municipality can push them out, depending on what flavor you like your government, how much micromanaging you want by referendums and direct voting and that kind of thing. How much, whether you like participatory representative democracy or direct democracy, that's up to you. You only have a say in your own co-op. Yes, that's the general problem with cooperatives, is that they give a voice only to the people who work in that company. Yes, Raul, of course, it's still better than the current system. No one is arguing otherwise. I'm arguing for why socialism is still better than free market, only where you replace private companies with private companies that have, a collective as the CEO instead of an individual as a CEO.
Within 2 years of the collapse, the so-called special period, severe rationing was introduced. Fuel became scarce. Export earnings fell by 60% and imports by 70%. Productivity ground to a near standstill for want of raw materials, and many factories were closed. Some chose to leave. Many in Miami forecast Fidel's end.
Estamos en periodo especial, un periodo difícil, un periodo uno de los más difíciles de nuestra historia. ¿Por qué? Porque no hemos tenido que quedar solos frente al imperio, solitos. ¿Y qué hacía falta para quedarse solo frente al imperio? Había falta unidad, pero hacía falta valor, hacía falta patriotismo, habría falta espíritu revolucionario.
I already answered that question so much, and I answered it twice.
Un pueblo cobarde se rinde y vuelve a la esclavitud, pero un pueblo digno, un pueblo valiente como nosotros no se rinde y no vuelve jamás a la esclavitud.
After the fall,
I have no problem with people asking questions, but I would prefer it if you asked questions in good faith and you actually listened to what I told you. You can't just repeat the same question over and over again and expect me to give a different answer. Like, I gave you my answer twice. Or I gave you one answer, you didn't like that answer. Then I gave you a different answer, you didn't like that answer. Then you asked the question again, and then I gave you another answer, which I don't think you were listening to, or you might not have been here. You might have left the stream for a while. But I have a little bit of good faith when you're trying to argue with me, because I've answered your question 3 times at this point.
The Soviet Union, it was
in 3
expected
different
that
ways.
Cuba would fall very quickly. Within a year or two, the Socialist Revolution in Cuba would be over. I think it's extraordinary that now, a decade later, Cuba survives.
En las realidades actuales del mundo, nosotros no podemos hablar de la construcción del socialismo en condiciones ideales.
under the ideal
Pero
conditions
todas
of
las conquistas sociales alcanzadas
all the
por el
social
socialismo en nuestro país
attained under
las defenderemos.
socialism in our country, we shall defend.
Hemos tenido que hacer una apertura
We have
económica
had to conduct an economic
porque
opening
nosotros perdimos
since we
capital,
lost capital,
mercado,
markets,
tecnología.
and technology.
Y ahora necesitamos
And now
mercado,
we
capital y
need markets,
tecnología
technology, and capital
para poder
in
desarrollar
order to
nuestro
be
país.
able to develop our country.
During this special period, new agreements were signed with Canada and European countries in the spheres of nickel, tobacco, biotechnology, the pharmaceutical industry, and communications. Tourism was given a big boost, and a wave of hotel building began. Fidel oversaw important tourism projects, checking many details personally. Many joint ventures were established, especially with European countries, and this became an important source of income.
Dure por muchos años, padre.
Y durará. ¿Cómo no?
Cubans know little about Fidel's personal life. It is said that he has 8 children and 8 grandchildren and has been married for over 30 years.
No, Sambacho, I definitely talked about that. When you were here, like you were asking the question, like you asked a question, I answered it. You said you want a straight answer, I gave you a straight answer. You said why, I explained to you why. Then you came back later, asked the same question again. I gave you a different answer, talking about how the concept of Castro's single-family rule is not really true. If you look at how the style and how the presidency in Cuba has worked over the years, and how Cuba has changed their constitution numerous times in order to broaden the amount of people that hold political power. Like, I gave you that whole spiel, and it seems to just have gone in one ear and out the other for you. If you want, you can watch the VOD. You can go back and listen to what I told you earlier. But I've already answered your question. Like, I've answered your question more times than I've answered anyone else's questions, okay? So I'm gonna stop answering that question now. So the next time you ask it, don't get mad if I don't answer it, because I've already answered it. And I don't want to repeat myself. That's it.
Revolutionario. Our life has been the life of a revolutionary.
Desde muy temprano.
From our very early
No son las condiciones ideales
I mean, those are not the ideal conditions
para el clima familiar.
for a family life.
En segundo lugar,
Secondly,
siempre fui opuesto
I was always opposed.
a mezclar
I have always been opposed
la política
to mixing politics
con los problemas íntimos personales.
with private life.
Y en ese sentido me he reservado una libertad total.
Preserve for myself total freedom.
Hay poca gente en el mundo que se ha podido reservar esa libertad.
Most politicians would not wish to discuss their personal life.
Okay, I will address it just because it happens that the documentary was going over exactly what we were talking about. Fidel Castro had 8 children and 8 grandchildren. Sambatsu, can you name for me which of them held any kind of political office, or how many of them were members of the Communist Party of Cuba? Since you want to talk about Castro's single-family rule.
Lives, it's their business. It's their private business. They don't have the luxury that Castro does simply to say no.
One of Fidel's closest friends is Nobel Prize winner Gabriel García Márquez.
Realmente lo que consolidó esa amistad fueron los libros. Y descubrí que es tan buen lector que yo, antes de publicar un libro, le traigo los originales. Es como si fuera un editor. la palabra esa que tiene un editor de libros, señala contradicciones, anacronismos, inconsecuencias que se le pasan a los
Miguel
profesionales.
Díaz-Canel is the president and the first secretary of the Communist Party.
Y además muy constante.
There is not a Castro in power anymore.
Y le rinde mucho la lectura. Es que lee siempre. En el carro tiene una luz para poder leer, sobre todo en la época en que hacía grandes viajes de noche en automóvil, siempre iba leyendo.
Mido 10 metros de alto.
For over 40 years, the world has known Fidel dressed in military fatigue.
It's important to make the distinction, right? Like Raúl Castro was not elected president or elected first secretary of the Communist Party because he was the brother of Fidel. Raúl Castro was a revolutionary. Like he had just as much credit, like had done just as many things. Raúl Castro, second Raúl Castro. What are you talking about, second Raúl Castro? There's only one Raúl Castro. He doesn't have two brothers named Raúl Castro. There's only one Raúl Castro.
The suggestion of Garcia Marquez. Fidel wore a traditional
dropping it now.
Guayabera shirt to a non-aligned conference in 1995. He also began wearing business suits the same year. Fidel gave up smoking his Havana cigars in 1985. His only contact with cigars these days is when he signs boxes for celebrities to benefit public health care in Cuba.
The thing that surprises me about Fidel, though, actually, is that he can't dance. I read that somewhere. I don't understand it. I think that's truly an interesting thing there.
Fidel Castro had multiple terms. He was elected
he can't sing either.
to his office every
gosh,
4 or 5 years, depending on which office it was.
He's got all those other good qualities.
The elections are usually held every 4
Fidel. Bueno, yo nunca
years.
he estado en fiesta
4
con
years.
él. No sé si ha bailado o a cantar, pero a él le gusta el canto. Y te acordarás de aquella flor que yo sembré para ti, cuando un día te di mi corazón. Dice, entendemos. Quiere que su pueblo sea culto y esa palabra ha gustado mucho en su pueblo. Por eso el pueblo lo quiere. Cuando no lo quiera, el pueblo lo tumba. Pero mientras el pueblo no lo tumbe, quieto ahí.
When Fidel turned 74, he invited the Buena Vista Social Club to help celebrate his birthday. Most of these musicians are older than he. He also invited Cuban doctors leaving to work in Haiti.
¿Cómo me divierto yo? Entonces, tengo buena salud, pues sí.
No le gusta perder.
Una noche estábamos de pesca y había un amigo que estaba pescando más que Fidel. Y Fidel se hacía el indiferente, estaba de un mal lado, se hacía el indiferente y miraba y veía que allá tenía más. Y el amigo empezaba a contar, muy amigo de él también, empezaba a contar para que él oyera que tenía más pescado que que Fidel. Y hubo un momento que fui y le dije al amigo, mira, no sigas pescando, porque mientras tengas más que Fidel no nos iremos nunca de aquí, y son las 4 de la madrugada. Al fin se empeñó, le pasó una racha de buena suerte, y cuando tuvo un pescado más que este, dijo, bueno, nos vamos porque son las 5.
Sí, no puedo poner la mandíbula porque está muy fuerte todavía. Ahora, él abre.
You open your hand.
Entonces, para la foto.
Now for the photograph.
Holy shit, do you guys see that? Fidel Castro is brutalizing Muhammad Ali. This fucking dictator, guys. I'm telling you, he's not a good guy. Here he's punching Muhammad Ali in the face. He's completely disrespecting him. This is so sad. Can we get the CIA to hasten the transition to democracy in Cuba, please?
Fidel has always maintained relations with important people from many parts of the world.
Fucking Jack Nicholson.
Ted Turner of CNN was given the Cuban Grand Tour.
La lambada. Yo quiero ver eso.
Yeah, Cuba's relations with Spain are very important following the 1991, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the special period. Cuba, being under an embargo by the United States, still had to fight to get establish any kind of commercial relations with countries like Canada, Mexico, but also the European Union. And Spain, because they share a language, they share a history, or maybe just because, I don't know, Spain has a tourism industry. Cuba, or Castro himself, I think, found it important to foster good relations with Spain, so that they could work together on the tourism industry. Cuba, in the special period, Cuba had to more or less rely a lot more, if not completely, on the tourism industry, because no one was buying their products anymore, right? Like the sugar products that they were making, the cigars and the rum and everything. Even like the oil refineries and stuff. Everything that Cuba was making, that Cuba was producing, that Cuba was ready to sell, no one could buy it. Partially because of the U.S. embargo. That said, no U.S. company or any company affiliated with the United States in like any way at all, like no companies with any subsidiaries in the U.S., etc., could do any kind of trading or have any kind of commercial ties with any Cuban entity at all. But so that made it just off the bat extremely difficult to export anything to anyone. But also the collapse of the Soviet Union, their biggest trading partner, and even though Russia kept up trading to some degree with Cuba, they couldn't really support the Cuban economy in the way that they could during the Soviet period, because Russia was now facing their own economic depression because of the collapse of socialism and the mismanagement of the new market economy that was thrust upon them, that Yeltsin thrust upon Russia. The revolutionary Fidel Castro meeting with the King of Spain, it might seem weird, like a weird image, but desperate times call for desperate measures. In Spain, Spanish companies have set up joint ventures with the Cuban government where they have hotels, for example, that are owned 50% by the Spanish company and 50% by the Cuban government. And that's a way for Cuba to expand its tourism industry and get more revenue for the government, which is desperately needed in order to maintain, their public health care and all the other parts of the Cuban welfare system that they built up that they need to maintain. Maybe Spain can make up for colonial history. Spain has a lot of reparations to pay if they want to make up for their colonial history. That's a lot of reparations. But yeah, maybe this is a start. A very small first step. But yeah, of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the United States, they tightened the embargo. They made it more difficult. They threatened more companies around the world, Japanese companies, Canadian companies, Mexican companies, European companies, with sanction by the U.S. State Department or the Treasury Department. We're going around the world basically threatening anyone, including banks like Swiss banks, Indian banks, that had any kind of ties with Cuba. Oops, I accidentally. There we are. That had any kind of commercial tie with Cuba, and basically told them, hey, if you don't stop trading with Cuba, we're going to sanction you. We're going to put you under sanction. We're going to punish you and basically end you as a company. Because a company being put under sanction by the U.S. State Department is not a very fun time at all. And the governments of Japan, the Japanese government acted very quickly to avoid that even happening, and they acted on behalf of what's the name of that? It was a Japanese corporation, a medical corporation that was selling blood bags to Cuba. For Cuba to use in their ICUs in their hospitals to help keep people alive and not die and stuff. And the U.S. State Department, they went to them, Terumo, I think, the Terumo Corporation. They went to them and said, hey, you guys are selling stuff to Cuba. You're not allowed to do that. You better stop it. And the Japanese government froze the bank accounts of Terumo until they agreed to stop having commercial ties with Cuba. You have a lot of stories like that with Swiss companies and American companies and companies with American subsidiaries selling medical equipment at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as the COVID pandemic was hitting or reaching Cuba, the U.S. made the conscious decision to tighten the embargo, right? To make the embargo harsher, so that Cuba wouldn't have the medical supplies that it needed to actually support its population, vaccinate their population, keep everyone healthy, to try to make it so that they would run out of blood bags, run out of syringes, run out of ventilators, oxygen tanks, and all these things that they needed to keep people alive, because the State Department's strategy for Cuba is tighten the embargo to make the country as poor as possible, hurt the economy as much as possible, specifically hurt them in their food supply and the medical supplies, which is what we've seen recently in Cuba during the COVID-19 pandemic. A steady food supply and supplies of medical equipment have been the two most dire things that Cuba has been lacking, and a big part of the reason for that is because of the embargo, which is preventing Cuba from importing the goods that they can produce domestically. That includes, things like agricultural equipment that they need to support their farmers, and medical equipment, like I mentioned. So the State Department's policy is to purposefully commit genocide, right? To purposefully cause as many people as possible in Cuba to die, so that they will become desperate and join in the opposition movement that's being funded also by the State Department, by government agencies like USAID, the Office of Transition Initiatives, and the National Endowment for Democracy, through private corporations like Freedom House and the International Republican Institute, and the other ones that I showed you on the I gave you the link to that one earlier in the stream. And you know, the accumulation of all those things was the July protests, right, which lasted for about 2 days. Right, that's basically the strategy that the State Department has and has had since 1960, is to, you know, make the Cuban people as hungry and desperate as possible until they'll agree to overthrow the government as their last way, you know. All that sounds way less positive than quote-unquote hastening the development of democracy in Cuba. Yeah, exactly. Well, you can't say, like on USAspending.gov, like under the description, you can't say like purposely cause genocide in Cuba to further U.S. foreign policy interests. Like you have to say hasten the transition to democracy or support civil society, you know. Oh, that sounds, one decent thing that Obama did in his 2 terms was normalizing the relationship with Cuba. Relations with Cuba were never normalized. They were on the path toward normalization, which was then abrupted by Trump. But then the relations between Cuba and the United States, even under Obama, was never fully normalized. Obama also never closed Guantanamo Bay, which he promised he would do. The embargo was never lifted. The travel ban was lifted very briefly, but the travel ban is only a very minor part of the Cuban embargo. Of course, it hurts Cuba in the way that it prevents American tourism, which could be a big boost to the Cuban economy. But the biggest issues with the embargo have nothing to do with the travel ban at all. And I don't truly believe that Obama actually wanted to end the embargo. I think he mostly just wanted to make a show of trying to do it. Anyway. Nobel Peace Prize winner Obama. Yeah.
Not even Fidel and Ted Turner are spared the rigors of the special period, where fuel is scarce and vehicles refuse to start.
Castro was determined that Cuba would be fully independent of the United States, and in that he succeeded. It now is. In fact, I would say that Cuba now, for the first time in its history, is completely independent. No longer a Spanish colony, no longer a protectorate of the United States, no longer a client state of the Soviet Union. It is on its own.
When Fidel was invited to address the United Nations at its New York headquarters, the U.S. government was obliged to grant him entry. Fidel was also invited to visit some rather surprising places.
Qué bien. Yo creo todo lo que dice el periódico.
I believe everything that your newspaper writes.
Menos cuando... excepto cuando hablan mal de nosotros.
Except when you speak ill about us.
Está bien.
Okay.
Encantado de saludar.
Thank you so much.
An invitation also
New
came
York
from
Times
the Wall
fucking
Street
sucks.
Journal.
Perhaps it is symbolic of changes in the world these days that the president of Cuba is at the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, the Wall Street Journal also sucks.
Can I ask you quickly, just very quickly, just an old, this is an old 1961 magazine.
Oh shit.
Members of the U.S.
It's the YMCA. Or the village people is what I meant to say.
The security force who were assigned to protect Fidel wanted to have their pictures taken with him.
You know, women are very okay.
Meticulous, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know Mr. Wallace, I think. I'm not sure you.
Yo no estoy seguro si
I
usted
interviewed you first in 1960 when you were here.
And what happened? What happened to democracy? What happened to free elections?
We discovered other formulas of democracy. And we discovered different formulas, a more honest formula to have the people participate in their democracy.
Do Cubans?
We discovered that it was better than the Americans. What?
Right-handed?
It's more than this.
Hay distintos estilos.
There are different styles, you know.
Worry
Para
about it.
darle a él. Para darle a él que me
I mean, like, he's right. Like, the American democratic system, like, if you're not born in America, you're not ingrained with like the US hegemony and everything, which you still are if you're even born outside of the USA, but like the US political and democratic system, like every part of it, like every part of the actual democratic system in the USA makes no sense, and it's just completely unjustifiable. And the only reason why it still is the way it is because it's like, oh well, it's always been that way, or well, it's been that way for 100 years, and it's just very hard to change stuff, which is just not a justification for anything. Like, can you imagine if, I don't know, fucking China, right? Like China was like talking about how like, oh yeah, you know, like all these like re-education camps in Xinjiang, like we really want to close them. Like we really want to close them. We just can't. It's just a very long political process, you know, like we have to jump through all these hurdles, and you know, like gotta go through like the Supreme Court, and like, oh, it's just like this whole thing. It's gonna take like probably decades to close those things, you know, like no one would accept that, you know, like the US would obviously say like, no, that's bullshit. You could change it anytime you want. You just choose not to, you know. But yeah, I mean, the United States telling any country in the world that they're not democratic enough is just like the height of arrogance, because the US is not in a position to tell anyone that they're not doing democracy correctly, because America has never been a democracy. Like at no point in America's history or in the US's history have they had a properly democratic system where a majority of the adult population could actually have an influence and like in how their countries run, or decide how their countries run. Not just have a voice and have an influence, but actually decide how their countries run. That's never been the case.
Castro! Bienvenido! He's a nice man. He's a beautiful man. Yeah. Okay, all right, okay.
I love that one.
Es un mensaje para el pueblo de Harlem.
Dejarle mi eterno cariño por lo que hicieron por nosotros aquella vez, hace 35 años, cuando no teníamos dónde parar en Nueva York. Ellos me recibieron en este hotel, no se puede olvidar nunca.
In Harlem, the historical memory of Fidel having met in the Teresa Hotel with Malcolm is still so much a part of Harlem culture that when I heard that he was planning to visit Harlem, I said, no matter where I am anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, I will definitely try to be in Harlem.
Welcome to the Abyssinian Baptist Church, where we believe in truth and in justice and equality, where we join with you in
automatic captions. We believe in truth and injustice. We believe in truth, we believe in injustice, and we believe in equality. That's the Abyssinian Baptist Church for you.
saying, Cuba yes, blockade no. God bless you.
God bless. Oh, there she is.
Truth and injustice. Cuba.
There she is. Right? Looks different. I'm pretty sure that was how it is.
Les contaba que fui al hotel a ponerme esta ropa.
Because I had been wearing the business suit before.
Porque yo decía,
Because I said to myself,
si la otra vez fui con esta ropa,
if the last time I went to Harlem I was wearing my fatigues,
¿cómo me voy a aparecer en
how am I
Harlem
going to go to Harlem?
vestido de caballero?
Business suit.
Y nuevos movimientos de masa que se están formando con tremenda fuerza. Ya no será la táctica de estilo bolchevique, ni siquiera el estilo nuestro, porque era otro mundo diferente. Estamos pasando de una etapa en que las armas podían resolver a otra etapa en que la conciencia de las masas, las necesidades de la historia y las ideas son las que van a hacer cambiar al mundo.
In 1998, it was announced that the Pope would make his first visit to Cuba. Fidel escorts an advance party from the Vatican on a
Playing
tour
close
of
to
his
Vandal
office.
Davis at the Russian Art Museum here. That is cool. She visited Russia a few times in the Soviet days.
Gorbachov. Lo voy a poniendo por aquí para respetar estas figuritas africanas que están aquí.
Don't put Gorbachev with the African figurines.
Este Khrushchev, con una mazorca de maíz. Stalin.
Calling Khrushchev a corn cob, like that just shows Fidel was up to date on all the latest memes.
Y al final, el zar.
Pictures of Che and Jesus Christ adorned Revolution Square. Fidel arrived for the Pope's Mass with the Vice President and Foreign Minister. During the Pope's visit, the Cuban government...
Ashleen, if you can get in contact with Angela Davis and ask her for an interview, I think you definitely need to go for it. It's, you never know when you're gonna get like an opportunity to do that. Like that's a once in a lifetime kind of a thing. Definitely seize any opportunity you have to talk to her.
facilitated contacts with the people. The pontiff denounced the U.S. blockade of Cuba. He also called on Cuba to open its doors to the world, and, in turn, for the world to open its doors to Cuba. While the Vatican called for an end to the blockade, and the United Nations repeatedly voted for the U.S. blockade of Cuba to be lifted, anti-Castro forces in the U.S. Congress continue to tighten the economic screws.
Now, let me be clear. Whether Mr. Castro leaves Cuba in a vertical position or a horizontal position doesn't matter to me. That's up to him, and that's up to the Cuban people. But he will leave Cuba.
We're doing business.
It's pretty telling that he says it's not up to the Cuban people whether Castro leaves or not. It's up to the Cuban people. Like, the Cuban people get to decide whether he leaves alive or not. But the Cuban people won't get to decide who their president is. Only the United States can decide who their president is. Just kind of almost saying the quiet part out loud. Not quite. Just a bit of a slip up.
Business with communist Chinese. These are the guys that shot me, you know, and we've forgiven them for what they've done. The North Koreans, they were the ones that got me over there in the first place, and we're doing business with them. In Vietnam, we lost tens of thousands of Americans. So if you want to be angry with somebody, and the Germans and the Japanese and the Italians, if you want to hold grudges, count me in, because I don't like the way I was treated. But if everybody's forgiven except an island country that thought the communist Russians would allow them to put missiles there, and then they backed out and took the missiles away, how long do we punish all of Cuba?
El bloqueo es una acción que se dirige contra una nación entera. Se dirige contra millones de personas. Y si el precio del bloqueo sería yo, es un precio sencillísimo, es un precio económico. Yo estaría dispuesto a negociar mi vida. Lo que no estaría dispuesto a negociar la revolución, a negociar el socialismo, a negociar los principios.
The Miami Cuban community has agitated for U.S. opposition to Fidel ever since the revolution and continues to demonize him.
No hay que olvidar que todos los medios de comunicación en Miami, radio, prensa, periódicos, diariamente están y durante años han estado alimentando al público común de Miami con noticias falsas sobre Cuba. Hay un volumen de noticias falsas, ¿verdad?, donde la gente llega a imaginarse como a Cuba como una prisión gigantesca.
The momentum towards greater engagement with Cuba was spurred by the Elian Gonzalez episode because Americans saw that our policy, in fact, was controlled by this little group of hardline exiles down in Miami, responding to their own views and interests, and not to the interest of the nation, not to the interest of the United States as a whole.
What caused the conflict between Miami and Havana to hit front pages all over the world was the saga of Elian Gonzalez, a 6-year-old boy. Elian's mother had drowned while trying to get to the United States. Elian's great-uncle, Lázaro Gonzalez, took the shipwrecked Cuban schoolboy into his house and, influenced by anti-Castro groups, refused to return him to his father, Juan Miguel, in Cuba. This little boy became a cause for Miami's anti-Castro exile community. But the vast majority of the American people favored Elian's return to his father. The Cubans were outraged. The people quickly took up Elian's cause, demanding that the boy be returned to his father, Juan Miguel. Millions of workers, students, housewives, and grandparents all over the country took part in demonstrations. Even Fidel. This issue united the country more than any other since the revolution. Juan Miguel and his immediate family traveled to Washington after the U.S. courts ruled in their favor. Fidel was there to see him off.
They're all paid protesters.
It would take another 3 months to finally bring...
You know, what they don't tell you is that most of the Cuban economy is actually spent on paying all those protesters. That's actually why the Cuban economy isn't doing very well. It's not about the embargo. It's actually just they're giving paychecks to everyone who protests.
Leon back home.
En el caso específico de Fidel, entramos dentro de su familia con este sufrimiento y se sintió como uno más de la familia, sufrió con todo esto y imagínese, inclusive lo dijo de que había sido uno de los momentos más emocionantes cuando nos vio llegar aquí.
In all, Elian had been away from Cuba for 7 months.
Yeah, I mean, this was only a year. This was only a year before this documentary came out. So this, as this documentary was in the making and in production, I imagine this was fresh on the memories of everyone who was involved. Which is probably why quite a fairly large chunk of the documentary is spent talking about it, because it's just recent events. This documentary is from 2001. Like I said.
Fidel, a pesar de que sentía un gran deseo de conocerlo, de poder ver a Elian, esperó hasta que el niño cursara su primer grado. Fidel le trajo de regalo un libro de la Edad de Oro y una caja de bombón.
Que tú has terminado el primer grado. Muchas felicidades. Así que tú no te vayas a comer esto y guardar eso.
Fidel le dijo a Elian, no te vayas a equivocar y te vayas a leer la caja de bombón y comerte el libro. Y ya con esto.
Wow. Dictator Fidel Castro telling a young boy he's not allowed to eat books. I don't know. Seems pretty authoritarian to me. Literally indoctrinating a child. Yeah. Who's he to tell that kid not to eat books or read chocolate?
Fidel Castro overthrew a dictator at the age of 32. Now, at 74, he is still a rebel, defiantly confronting the most powerful nation on earth, still making speeches that last for hours. Acknowledged as an important third world leader, he is still playing a key role in world affairs.
Fidel Castro is not any longer a realistic character. He's a larger-than-life guy. He's the most vicious, evil person in the world to a handful of Cuban Americans that are in Miami and who lobby the Congress. He's a monster who eats people and chews their heads off. And then to other people, he's a savior. And to other people, he's just a very interesting and extremely clever world leader, and to somebody else he has huge historical value because, as you say, he's outlived 9 American presidents, and because he's been in contact with history in a way that almost nobody alive has been. He really has been there, done it, seen it, and moved it, been a part of it, pushed it in some way.
He is a redwood tree. He's an old-growth redwood tree. And all around him has been clear-cut, and he's still standing. And they're lusting to go in and make that final cut. And then we will have nobody, really. We'll have, not like that. We'll have many other wonderful people, and we ourselves will be, whoever and whatever we are. But he is an inspiration.
Es que se recordará como uno de los grandes hombres de este siglo. Aún los que piensan que es por lo malo. Es decir, sea por lo bueno o sea por lo malo, sea por las dos cosas al mismo tiempo, Fidel no se olvidará en mucho tiempo.
Pero al final la gente tendrá que reconocer
At the end, people will have to
que fuimos
concede that we were
que
firm,
defendimos nuestras convicciones,
that we defended our
que defendimos
convictions,
nuestra independencia, que
that we
quisimos ser
defended our
justos,
independence, that we wanted to do justice,
que fuimos rebeldes.
that we were rebellious.
Y si a David se le recuerda,
And if David is remembered
porque luchó contra
because
Goliat,
he fought Goliath,
a los cubanos,
the Cubans,
que constituyen un David mucho
who
más pequeño,
constitute a much smaller David
contra un Goliat mucho más
against a
grande,
much bigger
se le
Goliath,
tendrá que recordar
will have to be
por lo menos
remembered
tanto como se
at
le
least as
recordó
much
a
as
David.
David is remembered.
Ah, very poetic. Well said indeed. All right. I'm getting just about ready to end the stream, but I want to play this little video that David Rovics made just after Fidel died in 2016.
When we look at history and how it's all unwound, there are a few people on the planet that have been more tightly bound with the liberation of our troubled human race than the man from Santiago with the beard upon his face, dressed in green fatigues that he wore most of his years, as he led his country longer than any of his peers. And few men have been vilified more often in the news than Comandante Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz. Born into a country of dengue and despair, ruled by foreign armies ever since Columbus got there, he'd reject his privilege and join humanity, forced to choose between his species and his family. And when legal means had failed to stop the suffering he saw, he decided it was high time to work outside the law. He organized a revolution with the rifle and the fuse. Comandante Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz. When you win a revolution, you might stop when you're ahead, but in the Havana Declaration, the revolutionaries said, wherever people anywhere are found to be oppressed, as long as we have hearts that beat within our chests, it is our duty to support them. And Cuba sent their troops, and Cuba sent their doctors in ever larger groups, and their leader was the one in the tracksuit and running shoes, Comandante Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz. It could have been someone else, and he might be the first to say, the movement makes the leader, not the other way. But around the world right now, sitting at their dinner plates, there are people praising the man who stood up to the United States and lived life as a beacon for a new society, with housing, healthcare, education, and the human right to dignity central to the vision for which he stood accused. Comandante Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz. I can't predict the future, but if the past is any indication, many more will follow the trail of the little Cuban nation. And soon in Havana, I hope that we may see a statue of the man to go beside Jose Marti. Wherefore goes Havana, or Angola, Mozambique, I'll always remember the big man's rosy cheeks. If the world could vote for a leader, how many just might choose? Comandante Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz. Comandante Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz.
All right. That's very nice. Airpax is live. I think we might raid into him. Or them. I'm actually not sure what their pronouns are. Slash raid. Oh, religious text. Yep, sure. 1 second. The Quran 3:138 from the Surah. This is a clear lesson to people and guidance and teaching for those who are mindful of God. Do not lose heart or despair. If you are true believers, you have the upper hand. If you have suffered a blow, they too have suffered one like it. We deal out such days among people in turn, for God to find out who truly believes, for him to choose martyrs from among you. God does not love evildoers, for him to cleanse those who do believe, and for him to destroy the disbelievers. Do you think you would enter the garden without God first proving which of you would struggle for his cause and remain steadfast? Before you encountered death, you were hoping for it. Well, now you have seen it with your own eyes. That was just a random quote. Do people like these? Do people like the random religious quotes? Where's the thing? I sure don't. Okay, we're rating camp packs. Thank you everyone for tuning in. You can get some channel points if you join the raid. Be nice to care packs. That's it. And happy birthday to Fidel Castro, the man, the myth, the legend. Rest in peace. All right. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.